Good morning and welcome to Monday on BBC One. Now, breakfast news and business breakfast.
And welcome to the BBC's Breakfast News. The headlines this morning. The Tories are celebrating a convincing victory in their elections for the European Parliament.
With all the results from England and Wales declared, they have 34 seats to Labour's 26.
Across Europe, there's been a swing to the right, with the centre-left losing its grip on power.
In Kosovo, Serb forces continue to withdraw, but tension remains high, and there's no sign of an end to the standoff between NATO and Russian troops at Pristina airport. The Conservative Party are this morning celebrating victory in the European elections. With results in from only England and Wales, the Conservatives have more MEPs than any other party. Labour have lost many seats and their vote has fallen dramatically since the general election. The Lib Dem vote also fell, but many smaller parties picked up seats. So far, the Conservatives have 34 MEPs, Labour 26, Lib Dems 9. The UK Independence Party took their first 3 MEPs ever. Plaid Cymru won 2 seats, as did the Green Party. BBC forecasts for the share of the vote, once all results are in, suggest that the Conservatives will be the largest party with 36% of the vote. Labour would have 28%, the Lib Dems 13%, and other parties a total of 20%. That means the Tories will have picked up some support since the last general election. But Labour have done badly, losing up to 16% of their vote. The Lib Dems have also lost out.
For the Tories, it was smiles all round. For them, it's been a good election. And despite the derisory turnout of just 23%, the result will be a boost for William Hague's leadership and his hardline stance on the single currency.
This is the comeback Conservative Party. We have done remarkably well. We've done remarkably well here in Yorkshire and also across the country.
I, being the regional returning officer, do hereby declare...
Pushed easily into second place behind the Tories, this was a humbling experience for New Labour, who've not lost a national election since 1992. But it was in their heartlands like Wales that Labour fared worst. They got more votes than Plaid Cymru, but only just, leaving them with the same number of seats, 2 each. A time for humble pie.
Tonight, the Labour Party in Wales and elsewhere in Britain, as we've been learning from the results, has had a somewhat sobering experience.
And in Scotland, the indications are that Labour will have fared as badly at the hands of the Scottish nationalists, though the final results there aren't due until lunchtime today. Already in Labour circles, there are mutterings about a lacklustre campaign and, privately, criticism of their campaign coordinator, Margaret Beckett.
The Labour Party has fought a campaign. It didn't take off nationally. This is not an issue of whether Margaret Beckett was responsible or not. Of course not. The Labour Party must take responsibility for its campaign.
Some celebrations, but nothing wild for the Liberal Democrats. Their glass half full, half empty. More MEPs, but their share of the vote down. Even so, their outgoing leader seems satisfied.
From here, I think now that we continue to build the party over the next few years. Many congratulations to you all. It's a very good night indeed. All the best. Good night.
Some of the smaller parties did well, with the Greens getting their first 2 MEPs, the UK Independence Party their first 3. They've benefited from proportional representation. But for Labour, these results are likely only to have further weakened their already dwindling enthusiasm for PR for Westminster. Norman Smith, BBC News.
Across Europe as a whole, the story is that socialist parties have lost ground to the right. The centre-right European People's Party are projected to be the largest grouping in the new parliament, with 225 up from 202. The Socialist Bloc, which until last week's elections was the dominant party in the parliament, is now projected to fall from 214 seats to 180 in the 626-seat assembly.
As the night wore on and the votes came in, it quickly became apparent that there just weren't enough of them. Here at the Count Centre in the European Parliament building in Brussels, it was hardly a celebration of democracy at work. Most Europeans, it turned out, hadn't bothered to go out and vote. The low turnout almost everywhere should ring alarm bells across the continent. What it says is that people, for whatever reasons, don't believe in Europe, not even in the Parliament, the EU's only directly elected body.
People haven't realised that what happens in the European Parliament matters because the Parliament's got the power to change people's lives by voting in favour or against laws about the environment and about economic matters and about trade, which matter.
The votes that were cast showed a significant swing in many countries away from socialists and social democrats towards parties of the centre-right. In Germany, for example, voters turned decisively against the government of Chancellor Schröder, which swept to power just 9 months ago. The result means that the MEPs who'll move into these glittering new premises in Strasbourg may often be at loggerheads with the centre-left governments that are in power in 11 of the EU's 15 countries. At least here in Belgium, though, people took the election seriously. In the wake of the recent contaminated chicken scandal, they threw out their government in a simultaneous election to the National Parliament. Angus Roxburgh, BBC News, Brussels.
The residents of the Kosovo capital, Pristina, are waking up to another tension-filled day this morning as the NATO standoff with the Russians at the airport continues and KLA soldiers have made camp in a suburban school.
It's been a tense night in Pristina, but British NATO troops have been on patrol. Their mission is to prevent the unsteady peace from breaking out into a new wave of violence. The presence of the alliance soldiers has been enough to convince ethnic Albanians that after so many weeks it's safe to walk the streets. For the Serbs who live here, though, this is their nightmare, and they're afraid not just of NATO, but also of the Kosovo Liberation Army, which has moved back into the capital. The sight of KLA guards openly standing outside a school which seems to have become a temporary barracks is remarkable. 2 days ago, for these men to appear on the streets would have meant certain death. It looks like being another day of tension at Pristina airfield. The Russians who got there before the British parachute regiment still have control. They say they're part of the international presence here, KFOR, but so far they've proved unwilling to fall into line with NATO commanders who want the British Paris here, the Russians elsewhere. The negotiations to find a settlement are still continuing. It's not proving easy. Outside Pristina, Kosovo is still proving a hazardous and unpredictable place. A German journalist who'd been shot and critically wounded received first aid in a British Army vehicle before being flown out to a field hospital. The 2 colleagues he was travelling with were killed. It's not clear who attacked their car on a lonely rural road or why they did it. All of this goes to underline the fact that Kosovo remains a very dangerous place, and it's not only hazardous for the NATO forces here, it's also very dangerous for the hundreds of thousands of refugees who are now so anxious to get back to their homes. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, with the British forces in Kosovo.
Well, our correspondent Jeremy Cook joins us now from the Kosovo capital, Pristina. Jeremy, what's the atmosphere been like overnight?
Well, John, I've actually been spending the night with British troops some distance outside Kosovo, but we're outside Pristina. But we're told that the atmosphere there overnight was tense. There was a shooting incident yesterday evening involving the British Army in which a parachute regiment soldier shot and killed a member of the Serb paramilitary police. So clearly there has been tension, but we've had no reports of any major incidents overnight, at least not at this point.
Now, of course, the Serb civilians are beginning to flee because they're scared. Do you think they're right to be scared?
They have no fears, I think, or at least no well-founded fears of the NATO troops here. Clearly the NATO troops are a well-disciplined army, in contrast perhaps to the experience that local people here have of men in uniform. But I do think there is the question mark of what the Kosovo Liberation Army, the ethnic Albanian rebels, would do when they come into these Serb areas. That is the real fear for the people who are fleeing, because it could be just so unpredictable. The KLA is now a highly radicalized organisation, an organisation which has tried but failed to protect its own community against atrocities caused by allegedly the paramilitary police and others. So consequently they are fleeing, but they say that they're fleeing as much from NATO as from the KLA, and I think that will be a cause of great concern and distress for NATO commanders who want to be seen as being even-handed in all of this.
And how are the British troops you've spent time with reacting to the fact that their route to the airport remains blocked by Russian soldiers, their supposed allies?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of frustration there. I mean, I travelled into the country with the Spearhead, with a parachute regiment, and they knew, I think, before they even got to the airfield that the Russians were already there, but they were hoping all the way up that some deal could be done, that the Russians would fall into line as they indicated they would. But there has been a standoff now for a couple of days, and it's hugely frustrating. There have been lengthy negotiations here on the ground, of course, other negotiations far away from Kosovo in diplomatic quarters, but so far there's been no resolution, and there are fears here that the whole tension at the airfield, the whole complex matter, could escalate still further during the course of the coming day.
Jeremy, thanks. We'll return to you later in the programme.
Well, overnight Serb troops have continued with the agreed pull-out of Kosovo. In Prizren, the country's second largest city, Serb troops left supervised by NATO peacekeepers. Under the peace deal brokered last week, the rest have until tomorrow to move out of southern Kosovo. Our correspondent Clive Murray is in Prizren now. Clive, what's the situation been like there overnight?
Overnight, the streets here, Sophie, were still rather tense. There were very few civilians on the roads here. This is in stark contrast to the thousands of people that welcomed the NATO troops in the afternoon. But after around 8 o'clock and the shooting incident, which was just to my left over here outside a hotel, when two Serbs opened fire on NATO troops here, one of those Serbs was fatally killed and was fatally wounded in return fire. The streets emptied. So the atmosphere overnight has been a little bit tense. We have seen a lot of NATO troop movement overnight, a lot of tanks, a lot of armoured personnel carriers moving through the streets, and interestingly, a lot of lorries moving out just beyond our position here, further north towards Serbia, carrying many of the Serb army and paramilitary fighters who've been frankly terrorising the population here over the last 2 or 3 months.
The Serb troops have until tomorrow to move out of southern Kosovo. How well advanced is that?
Well, from the evidence that we've seen of the columns of trucks and cars moving north from here, carrying Serb fighters, the police and paramilitaries, it looks as if that movement of troops is proceeding pretty well. In fact, this morning as we arrived to this live position, we saw a number of lorries continue to move further north, taking some of these fighters away. I mean, as you say, the Serbs have really until midnight Tuesday to get out of the southern sector of Kosovo. This is the sector that's going to be controlled by German NATO peacekeeping troops, and it does look as if that movement is well underway.
Clive Murray, thank you.
Other news now. New plans will be announced today to halve the number of teenage pregnancies in the UK over the next 10 years. A major publicity campaign, new sex education lessons in schools and hostels for some teenage mothers are amongst the measures being considered. The plans are based on a report from the government's Social Exclusion Unit and will be revealed by the Prime Minister later this morning.
Sam Jones is 16. She became pregnant when she was still at school and had to leave before completing her education. Looking after her daughter Danielle means coping with a lot more than other girls her age have to.
It's difficult because you can't do what you want to do. You can't wake up in the morning and think, oh, I think I'll just lay in this morning. Wake up and think, right, gotta go and get Danielle, she's crying. What shall I give Danielle? What shall she wear today?
Sam's story is not unusual. The UK has the highest rate of teenage pregnancies in Western Europe. Today, the government will announce practical measures to tackle the problem. These are expected to include a major publicity campaign spelling out the harsh reality of life as a teenage mother. Boys will be targeted by the Child Support Agency to pay for any children they father, and teenage mothers will be put in hostels if they're not looked after at home.
Condoms which are considered to be safe to use in this country have got the British...
These pupils from a South London comprehensive are being taught about sex by the school nurse. The government wants to see more of this kind of approach, where the emphasis is on how to form relationships and resist pressure to have sex early.
You're not promoting promiscuity or underage sex. What you are promoting is responsibility and negotiating skills and being able to say no.
Simply telling young people not to have sex is regarded as counterproductive. Instead, they'll be encouraged to change their behaviour, But ministers are aware there's only so much the government can do to achieve this. Chris Hogg, BBC News.
The old saying that children should be seen and not heard will be turned on its head this week when children throughout the UK will be encouraged to make a noise. Thousands of children are expected to break from lessons to bang drums and sing songs as part of the NSPCC's 1 Minute Noise campaign, which aims to promote children's right to be heard.
Archaeologists in Egypt, aided by a donkey, have discovered a burial ground they believe could contain up to 10,000 mummies. It would be the largest find of mummies ever recorded. The tombs were found at the Bayara oasis, more than 200 miles southwest of Cairo. They include the mummies of wealthy and powerful people who lived over 2,000 years ago.
The desert southwest of Cairo has been renamed the Valley of the Mummies. Unearthing them has been a painstaking process. So far, 105 have been found. Many are resting on open surfaces, their golden masks in immaculate condition. Others remain unexamined, wrapped in linen or locked inside terracotta coffins.
The discovery is very important because it gives us idea about daily life and also about the religious significance in the Roman period.
Some of the mummies have now been taken to Cairo for further examination while the excavation continues. If this does turn out to be the world's largest discovery of mummies, archaeologists will have a donkey to thank. They were led to the tombs when the animal accidentally slipped and fell into the burial ground. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
It's 16 minutes past 6. We'll be back in a few minutes, but first here's Tanya Beckett with this morning's business news.
Sophie, thanks very much. The UK government will today seek to start the process of rebuilding Kosovo, ensuring that British firms secure a key role in the reconstruction process. It's reportedly seeking an alliance with the Japanese. The two countries work together on similar projects in Bosnia. It's thought British businessmen and officials could fly out to the region as early as Wednesday, if it's safe enough to do so. First estimates for the total bill for repairing the damage caused by 11 weeks of NATO bombing in the region is estimated at around £60 billion. The most pressing need is to repair the damaged infrastructure, although the decision about who pays is yet to be decided. Many British firms are already involved in reconstruction projects in the region in such places as Albania, building roads, bridges, airports, water and sewerage supplies. Well, I'm joined in the studio by Jim Dawson, Chairman of the Association of Consulting Engineers. He's also Chairman of GIB Limited, which has several reconstruction projects already underway in the region. Jim, how does one go about assessing exactly how much this is going to cost?
Well, first of all, we have to get on the ground and we have to look to see what the damage is and where it is and what the priorities are. Your figure of £60 million seems to me slightly high, but I hope it's not as much as that.
Now, we don't know who's paying for it, so how do we know who's going to get the work to do the reconstruction? Because obviously it's big business, isn't it?
Well, all the work will be tendered by international competitive tendering standards, and this means that it will be awarded on quality and cost.
Irrespective of who's paying?
Irrespective of who's paying.
Now, how are British businesses poised to take advantage of that business?
Well, we're very keen on international competitive tendering to World Bank standards, and we are able to compete on quality and cost and get the background noise right in our tenders, and this is what we aim to do this time as well.
But of course we have a strong pound and I suppose comparatively high reconstruction costs, labour costs.
Yes, indeed. Our pound costs are high, our income is in euros, and this is a disadvantage to us. In fact, we have lost 30% in competitiveness in the last 3 years.
What sort of percentage of the business do you think we could hope to get realistically, looking at past cases?
Well, I'd think around about 25 to 30% would be a high tide mark, and that's what we should be aiming for.
Now, clearly some of the countries surrounding in the region could well argue that they've lost tourist trade, perhaps they need a boost for their economies, and this would be a good way of helping them out. Is that a strong argument when it comes to EU tendering?
Well, I think it is. I think the countries such as Albania and Macedonia have suffered grievous harm under previous regimes, and they need something on their infrastructure, even if there had not been a war.
How does one go about then deciding what you reconstruct first? You go for infrastructure first or houses? Because clearly the refugees are returning fast. They need something to go to.
Well, I think this is one of the big conundrums. You can't have housing without infrastructure, and you can't have infrastructure without housing. To get the whole thing coordinated together is going to be a very great challenge.
And do you think that there is a realistic chance? We were talking there about working with Japanese companies, for example. Does that happen a lot?
Yes, it is. We have a permanent tie-up with a Japanese company and we work right throughout the developing world with them.
Now, clearly we've got a lot of experience in that region. What do you think the priorities should be now in terms of getting British companies in there?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to get people in the ground as soon as possible to try and form an opinion on what the priorities really are. We see from television pictures, I mean graphic pictures of the destruction, but we don't really know what the priorities are till you get there and you have a proper assessment.
Is there a danger, and are you prepared, are British companies prepared for the potential danger to your workers?
Well, we've all worked in difficult areas, whether it's Mozambique or Angola or Vietnam or wherever. And most of our people on the ground take very great care to stick to the well-beaten paths with the military close by.
Well, finally, what is the danger in terms of investment for a building company who's investing money here? What is the danger that you don't get paid for what you're doing, basically?
Well, we're going to be paid by the European Union and the other aid agencies, and they're good payers and they are very good clients, and we value their trust implicitly.
Jim Dawson, thanks for joining us this morning. A look at reconstructing Kosovo, though. Well, the anti-Euro message sent by British voters to the government in the Euro elections doesn't seem to have dissuaded traders from buying the new currency. Europe's central bank officials have been sounding an upbeat message about its potential to rise and dismiss the prospect of currency intervention. Let's take a look at where it's trading right now, if we can. Pound euro at 153.49 means that the euro itself is worth just over 65 pence, dropping as we speak, though. Dollar euro at 95.36 means that the euro is worth $1, coming up to 5 cents, so it's bounced back a bit. Let's turn to then other currencies and where the dollar is trading, if we can. There we are, at 120.60. You can see it's up just about 2.5 yen. They're very strong performance. The concern is that rates in the US are going to go up. That's what's backing the dollar at the moment. Pound dollar at 161 flat is up a touch as well. So, and there are the euro rates again against the pound. Well, the price of gold has fallen dramatically over the past week as a growing list of government bodies and the IMF announced that they would be selling off some of their reserves to relieve the debt burdens of the world's poorest nations. We turn to the markets, Japanese stocks as well. You can see how that's fallen back. Japanese stocks, the Nikkei up just about 54 points there. Very quiet trade really in Asia at the moment. As I said, there's a concern that US interest rates could well be going up sooner rather than later. But pessimism about the economy and strong growth figures last week are also holding back the Nikkei up just about 53 points there. You can see the Hong Kong Hang Seng up just about 11 points as well. The Dow ended last week down 130 points. All eyes, of course, on the States, as I said, this week. Well, let's move on now and to the rail and bus operator Stagecoach. It's expected to confirm a £715 million takeover offer for Coach USA later today. The deal, if successful, would almost double Stagecoach's presence in the worldwide coach and bus market. Like Stagecoach, Coach USA was founded in the mid-90s. Profits last year totalled nearly £34 million. The Automobile Association, the UK's largest motoring organisation, fell £21 million into the red last year as it shut down non-core and loss-making businesses, including its retail shops, mobile communications, home assistance and direct insurance underwriting. It's thought the measures could signal the end of the organisation's mutual status and clear the way for a potential buyer. Some 24 companies are said to be interested. Meanwhile, a report out today by the independent think tank Demos urges the government to discourage so-called carpet bagging and instead make laws which will aid the growth of mutuals. It argues that the mutuality movement is still thriving in spite of the fact that many building societies have turned themselves into banks, but it says it wants a royal commission to look at the case for stronger protection of such organisations. Let's turn to what's going on in the papers this morning. And on the business pages more particularly, let's turn first of all to Roger Bootle. He's writing in The Times. He says that paradigm is a word often used by people who would like to have a new idea but can't think of one. He says, let's hope that Alan Greenspan, chairman of the US Federal Reserve, does not use the P word when he addresses Congress on Thursday of this week. Let's turn, quite a dry article by Mr. Bootle, characteristically. Let's turn to what's being said in The Independent. This is written by Stephen Bell, who incidentally is also the chief UK economist of Deutsche Bank. He says that the influence of the US financial markets on the UK has been growing in recent years. In fact, he says that sterling now trades like a surrogate dollar. Why does it matter, he asks? Well, monetary decisions taken in Washington will be more important for your future mortgage rate than the decisions taken in Frankfurt or even London. He says that although rates actually here have gone down, in essence, they've actually gone up because of sterling strength, I assume he means. Let's turn to the FT and the Lex column now. Hats off, it says, to Arriva's new chief executive, Bob Davis, for securing the top price of £513 million for its car leasing business. With the track record of 2 failed profit warnings and a failed auction, it was hardly a prime candidate for a successful sell-off, he says. Well, we'll be back very shortly, but that's all the business news for now. Back over to John and, well, rather John Nicholson.
Yeah, it's me and my own. It's, what time is it? It's 25 minutes past 6 for those of you who've just joined us. A reminder of this morning's main story. Europe has swung to the right in the elections for the European Parliament. In Britain, the Conservatives were the clear winners, taking 34 seats to Labour's 26. The Liberal Democrats have 9, and there were victories too for the Greens and the UK Independence Party, both winning seats for the very first time. So, as we've just been finding out, in the Great Britain and across Europe, centre-left parties have lost ground in the European elections. Well, I'm joined now by 2 experts on voting patterns who will tell us what that means. Professor Tony King of Essex University, who's analysed the results here in the UK, and Anne-Marie Le Glonac, who is a researcher at the Marker Block think tank in Berlin, who's going to explain the results across the whole of Europe. Well, can I start off first of all with you, Professor King? Bad night, obviously, for the Labour Party.
Dreadful night for the Labour Party. The Euro elections of 1979, just after Mrs Thatcher's landslide victory, saw Labour do better than it did yesterday.
But are we to assume from that that the Blair government is unpopular?
The Blair government isn't unpopular in the sense that if there were a general election next week, Labour would almost certainly win and win big over the Conservatives. I think that's fairly clear. But what it does suggest is that Labour support is an awful lot thinner than people have imagined. People talk about people being enthusiastic about Tony Blair, enthusiastic about the new Labour project. I must say, I think the results of this poll suggest that whatever else is going on here, there isn't an enormous amount of enthusiasm.
And of course, in both Scotland and Wales, Mr Blair's got an additional problem because he's losing ground to the Nationalists again.
Oh, it's very striking, and it was striking in the Scottish elections, it was striking in the local elections, that there is now a 2-party system in Wales, Plaid and Labour, a 2-party system in Scotland, the SNP and Labour, and both Plaid and the SNP are breathing down Labour's necks. There's no question about that.
Anne-Marie, can I turn to you and ask you, across Europe, we've seen the same pattern. Is that because Europe as a whole is swinging to the right, or are we seeing protests against predominantly centre-left governments?
It's basically protest. I mean, these European elections generally have been elections where opposition parties and also small protest parties of the extreme right or extreme left have been doing well. And this is once more the case.
And lots of national factors, presumably, in different countries.
Yes, they are national elections, actually. You don't have a European electorate, you don't have European issues, and what the European Parliament is all about is still very unclear for the national voters.
So people are quite aware of what they're voting for. They want to vote in protest. They don't want to vote for a European ideal of any kind.
Yes, exactly. But at the same time, it's a very tricky thing because there have been polls recently done in France, for instance, and in other countries showing that voters in Europe want more of Europe. But this is not exactly the Europe they want, and it's not made by the politicians that they want.
Well, you'll both be with us throughout the programme, I hope, interpreting more of the results for us. Thank you very much. Sophie.
Well, coming up on Breakfast News, an uneasy peace hangs over Kosovo. NATO continues to move in, and it'll have a difficult job on its hands to persuade the remaining Serb civilians that it's safe to stay. We'll be hearing more later in the programme.
Good morning to you from South Today. The Green and UK independence parties are still celebrating their victories in last night's European elections. In the South East, 11 MEPs were elected. In the South West, there were 7. The UK Independence Party, which advocates total withdrawal from Europe, now has 2 MEPs. In the South East, the top 5 in the Conservatives list were elected. Labour gained 2 seats, as did the Liberal Democrats. The Green Party gained 1 seat and Nigel Farage was voted in as MEP for the UK Independence Party. In the South West, the Conservatives dominated the evening. They gained 4 of the 7 seats up for election. Labour gained 1 seat, as did Graham Watson for the Liberal Democrats. Michael Holmes, the leader of the UK Independence Party, took a seat too. The Conservatives are celebrating taking half of the total number of seats available in the South. Tim Burke reports.
In the South West, the Conservatives took 4 of the 7 seats available. Labour and the Liberal Democrats were disappointed with just 1 each, but the UK Independence Party were rejoicing at their first real inroad to political power. And so too in the South East. Nigel Farage is the second of the UK IP's MEPs. In the South East, the Conservatives took 5 of the 11 seats, Labour and the Liberal Democrats 2 apiece. But here, the Greens were celebrating.
It was a tense moment, but I think it's a real vindication for all those hundreds of people, the thousands of people that voted Green, so we're tremendously excited. And it shows we're on the national stage now, we're here to stay, so watch out for the next elections as well.
The Conservatives are happy that those of us who bothered to vote apparently endorse their message on Europe. Tim Burke for BBC South Today.
On to other news, a 17-year-old boy has died after being found with extensive injuries near the pier in Southsea. Hampshire Police have launched an investigation into how Martin Granger from Borth End in Portsmouth was injured. He was found opposite South Parade Pier at the junction with Clarendon Road late last night. He was taken to hospital but later died. The Royal Navy frigate HMS Grafton will arrive back in Portsmouth today. For the past 2 months, she's been escorting a French aircraft carrier in the Adriatic. Her crew were in the front line of the conflict in the Balkans, helping to protect the French aircraft carrier Foch, whose jets carried out hundreds of bombing attacks in Kosovo. It was the first time this century that a Royal Navy warship had been under the direct command of a French admiral. On to the travel. Clarendon Road in Southsea is closed. Diversions are in place. And finally, a look at today's weather. The early morning mist will clear to reveal a dry day across the region with some long, sunny spells. Top temperature 21 degrees Celsius. And that's it from us for the moment. We're back in half an hour.
Good morning and welcome back to the BBC's Breakfast News programme. The headlines so far this morning. The Tories are celebrating victory in the European elections. Minority parties also did well. The Greens won 2 seats and the UK Independence Party picked up 3. The Liberal Democrats have 9 and in Wales, Plaid Cymru won 2. The results from Scotland and Northern Ireland will be announced later today.
Across the rest of Europe, as in the UK, voter apathy took hold in most countries. But with nearly all the results counted across the European Union, it appears that after 20 years of domination by the centre-left, the centre-right has now gained control of the European Parliament.
Yugoslav forces are continuing their withdrawal from Kosovo as the NATO peacekeeping force braces itself for more resistance. Yesterday, British and German troops were involved in armed confrontations in the province. And talks will continue today to try and break the standoff between NATO and Russian forces who've blockaded the road to Pristina airport.
Those are the main headlines. Now here is all the sport with Rob Bonnet. Rob, good morning.
Thanks, Sophie. Good morning to you. Well, Tim Henman plays his friend Pete Sampras again today and is expected to win. That's because Henman, with a handicap of just 3, is a better golfer than Sampras. They're meeting on a course near Henman's South London home just 24 hours after their Stella Artois tennis final at Queen's Club yesterday. An evenly balanced 3-setter taken on a tie-break by Sampras, who's amongst those agreeing with Henman's own assessment that the British #1 will be tough to beat at Wimbledon.
If it wasn't for Pete Sampras, Tim Henman might well have won Wimbledon already. It's the British #1's misfortune that his career has coincided with that of arguably the greatest grass court player ever. In fact, Henman has never beaten Sampras on any surface, but at least he'll go into Wimbledon after coming close in yesterday's Stella Artois final. He won the first set tiebreak 7-1, a margin which indicates Henman is closing the gap on the great American. But a gap there still is. An early break in the second allowed Sampras to draw level before the decider also went to a tiebreak. A tiny error against Sampras can prove fatal. Henman failed to kill a high volley and was made to pay with a perfect lob. The break had been won and the match and championship quickly followed.
He's so strong. I mean, I really see him one day winning Wimbledon. He's got a lot of talent, and I think this country should be real proud of Tim Henman because he's going to be around for a lot of years.
The problem for Henman is that Sampras is likely to be around for a few years as well. Ben Munro-Davis, BBC News.
Well, now an object lesson for cricketers tempted to celebrate a catch before they've shown the umpire they've properly taken it. Herschel Gibbs' premature moment of triumph probably cost South Africa their thrilling World Cup game against Australia at Headingley yesterday. Despite South African appeals, Steve Waugh, then on 56, survived and continued towards a brilliant 120. And an Australian 5-wicket win with just 2 balls to spare. Later, Waugh said his innings was as good as any he'd played. Now, that result leaves the final Super 6 table like this. India and Zimbabwe go out. Pakistan meet New Zealand in one semi-final on Wednesday at Old Trafford. South Africa and Australia meet again in the other on Thursday at Edgbaston. The world champion Mika Häkkinen is back on top of the Formula One Drivers' Championship, courtesy of a rare error by Michael Schumacher, whose Ferrari was leading Häkkinen by 4 seconds when he crashed during lap 32. The safety car had to be brought out 4 times during the race, including the very last lap, and only 10 cars finished. The other drivers on the podium were Giancarlo Fisichella in second place and Eddie Irvine in third. But here's a crash from which Scotland's Peter Dumbreck admits he's lucky to survive. His Mercedes flipped into the air and off the circuit during the Le Mans 24-hour race over the weekend. Dumbreck's recollection of the incident was as follows: I was getting closer and closer to the sky, and I thought this could be the end for me. And then I saw the trees, and that was an even worse feeling. I knew if I crashed through the branches, it would be fatal. Amazingly, though, he emerged unhurt. The race was eventually won by BMW. Bradford Bulls are the new leaders of Rugby League Super League. They beat struggling Hull Sharks by 42 points to 14 and have to take them to the top after St Helens defeat by Gateshead. The Castleford Tigers are now 5th in the table after beating the Warrington Wolves by 39 points to 6. Centre Francis Maloney scoring a hat-trick of tries on his return from injury, this against one of his former clubs. Finally, Sweden's Jamo Sandelin has made Europe's Ryder Cup team after victory at the German Open in a playoff, but only just. The South African Retief Hoosen should have won it, but missed this 3-footer on the 18th and then went on to bogey the same hole in the playoff to hand Sandelin victory. The Swede now lies 3rd behind Colin Montgomery and Hoosen in the European Order of Merit. That's our sport. More, of course, at 7:30 and 8:30, but now back to John.
Thanks, Rob. It's 6:37. Back now to the European elections. With the results in from England and Wales overnight, some of the smaller parties have most reason, perhaps, to celebrate. The Greens winning their first ever seats, 2 seats in fact, and I'm joined now by one of their new MEPs, Caroline Lucas. Good morning, Caroline Lucas.
Good morning.
Many congratulations. You must be feeling very happy this morning.
Very happy.
Were you expecting to win?
We knew we had a very good chance of winning a handful of seats, and we're delighted that that actually did come true last night.
Of course, you know what people are going to say to you today, which is that obviously being European elections, people have the freedom to cast protest votes, and yours was a protest vote.
Well, I think you can see what's happening is that people are beginning to understand the proportional representation system and realising that their votes can translate into seats. And if you look at what happened in Scotland, when we had PR introduced up there, we got our first Scottish MP elected. And now we've got PR in the European elections, we've got our first Greens elected. And I think nothing can take away from that. That's an incredibly positive thing.
But of course, with such a very small turnout, you're bound to face accusations that your victory, while personally satisfying, is entirely unrepresentative of national opinion.
It's a great shame that the turnout wasn't greater. I would certainly agree with that. But I think our result is certainly as legitimate as anyone else's. We worked really hard to get people out on the streets to come and vote for us. We know that they were responding very strongly to the messages we were putting out around GM foods, around international trade, around employment issues. And so you may call part of that a protest vote, but it was also a very positive vote. It was a vote for change, and that's what people are going to have.
What do you intend to do with your 2 MEPs?
Well, we'll be joining a very strong group already in the European Parliament. There are Greens from around 8 or 9 different countries there now. The total numbers of Greens have gone up over the last night, so that's great news for us as well. We're looking at a total group of around 36 Greens. And so together with our colleagues, we're going to be working on issues like GM foods, like the international trading system. We're going to be putting the environment and social justice at the top of the political agenda. We're going to be pursuing the whole issue of fraud and corruption, because the Greens were at the very forefront of trying to expose what was going on in the Commission, and we're going to be trying to increase the transparency and democracy of the European Parliament and the different parts of the institutions, because we believe that one of the reasons for the low turnout is basically people don't really understand very much about the European Parliament and the other institutions. Those institutions need to be brought close to the people, and we want to be part of that process.
Caroline Lucas, thank you.
Thank you.
We will have plenty more on both the European elections and, of course, the Kosovo crisis. But first of all, Tanya Beckett with this morning's business news.
Sophie, thanks. Well, one of the biggest aerospace fairs in the world, the Paris Air Show, began this weekend and immediately headed straight into some turbulence, with a warning from Boeing and Airbus. The 2 leading plane manufacturers forecast that orders could fall because of a slowdown in the global economy. The 8-day show is already being dominated by talk of mergers and alliances. Nicola Masterman now reports.
It was an inauspicious start to the 43rd Paris Air Show. A Russian military aircraft lost power and crashed, but no one was hurt. Talk now is of falling orders in civil aircraft by as much as 40% in Boeing's case, and of consolidation in an intensely competitive market. The European aerospace industry has been battling for more market share in the face of stiff competition from its US rivals, mainly Boeing and Lockheed Martin. Last year, in a bid to compete more effectively with the US, European leaders called for Europe's top aerospace firms to join forces to create one European aerospace and defence company. But the project failed to take off after British Aerospace instead opted to join forces with the Marconi defence arm of the UK's GEC. And now the vision of one European aerospace company seems further away than ever, with British Aerospace's announcement yesterday that it wants to forge a partnership with a major US company. Meanwhile, there's speculation that DASA of Germany, which last Friday announced plans to merge with Spain's state-owned aerospace company CASA, is already pursuing a deal with a US partner. DASA's chief executive cancelled a press conference in Paris to fly to the US at the weekend. And its parent company, Daimler Chrysler, is reported to be taking advice from US investment banks Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley on floating its aerospace arm.
Nicola Masterman reporting there. Well, alliances with the airline industry is nothing new, of course. These days, travellers are being offered much more choice in their carriers. But since all airlines can't fly all routes all the time and still make money, they're having to resort to special alliances to increase their reach. As Richard Quest now reports, the race is on for the world's leading carriers to gang up in groups.
Just who owns this plane? It could be United, or SAS, or Lufthansa, Varig, or Thai. The plane's got the logos of different airlines because they're all members of one star alliance. The carriers banded together 2 years ago to try and offer so-called seamless travel. Check in with one and you have the services of them all. And that includes being able to offer more destinations, more business lounges, and most vitally, earn and burn frequent flyer miles. Powerful stuff. So once Star was up and running, it wasn't long before rivals arrived. Enter Oneworld, started by British Airways and American Airlines to compete. It's now gathering other members as quick as it can.
Alliances are a capital, less intensive way of serving areas that you wouldn't normally serve on your own. In other words, alliances allow airlines to spread their wings, to go to other areas of the world and serve more markets that they couldn't justify going on their own.
It makes sense. So it's not surprising that a third alliance is also being formed, headed by Continental and Northwest, with possible members including Air France and Alitalia of Italy. The problem with airline alliances is it can all become very complicated very quickly. Take, for example, here at the United Airlines terminal at Kennedy Airport. These are the various partners of Star Alliance, with their very long code numbers for the different flights. The passenger arriving has to know not only which airline he thinks he's travelling with, but which carrier is actually running the flight. It's all very difficult sometimes.
I think it remains to be seen how important the alliances will be. It's going to be an execution. You know, some of them today are a lot of logos and signs and not much more. Some of them give you little cards. What they want to do, of course, is give you a seamless passenger experience so that as I move from one airline to another, I'm treated the same way equally worldwide.
All I can say to that is because you and I know it's not true.
David Tate is head of Virgin Atlantic in the United States. Virgin's one of those carriers that's decided to wait and see. It believes the theory is fine. The practice can be anything but.
In any relationship such as the alliances, they tend to try and sort of become a gooey amalgam where services don't generally tend to rise to the level of the best in the relationship. They'll maybe settle around the middle somewhere, possibly lower.
It's early days for the airline alliances. The benefits have yet to truly show through. In the end, only the high-spending business traveller will probably notice. They're the fish that this line's been cast to hook.
That was Richard Quest. Well, if you're jetting off yourselves, let's take a look at the latest tourist rates. If you're off on holiday to France, your pound will get you 9.75 francs. Spain, 247 pesetas. Italy, 2,894. Lira. Greece, 482 drachma. You might fancy a bit of shopping, though. For many of us, shoe buying can be a very trying experience. Endless traipsing around the shops looking for anything in your size that you like. A report on the footwear industry by retail analyst Verdict Research confirms some of the difficulties shoppers find. It suggests that the UK's shoe shops still belong in the dark ages, and consumers aren't always being offered what they want, as Sarah Boxall's been finding out.
Now I gotta cut loose, put loose.
With so many shops on the high street selling footwear, you'd think the shoe-searching consumer would be in retail heaven. But not so, it seems. Many of us just can't find what we want.
Well, I've been looking all over the place at the moment and I can't find anything that I'm looking for.
A lot of shops, but all selling the same goods, really, under different brand names. Much the same styles.
High street stores are really lacking in men's shoes at the moment, I think. And if you really want to get good shoes, you have to go to the designer stores, and they're a little bit out of my price range at the moment.
So where do you get yours?
I got these in New York, actually.
Well, perhaps it's not surprising then that the footwear market in the UK declined by 3.2% last year. Specialist shoe shops have been particularly badly hit as competition has increased from supermarkets and clothing retailers. Since 1990, 4,000 shoe stores have closed, and between 1994 and 1998, the specialist retailers' percentage of the market fell from 65.4% to 60.7%. Some firms, such as Stylo Barrett, have been particularly down at heel. After suffering a string of setbacks, including slow sales of hush puppies and the collapse of a major supplier, they reported a loss of £14.8 million. But the company, which is phasing out its hush puppies and Saxone outlets, is confident that they'll be back on their feet again soon.
We believe that the ranges that we're now beginning to offer are showing some signs of improvement. There are some exciting product coming into the business, and our aim now with the chain that we've got of over 300 outlets is to get that product down the line and into the stores and across to the customers. And we do believe that there are some small signs of improvement just beginning to appear in certain places.
And Barrett's aren't the only ones changing their look. Clark's, the market leader with over 10% share, have had a makeover and are now sporting a more fashionable image. And it seems all shoe shops on the high street will have to follow suit and drag themselves out of the dark ages if they want to survive.
What we'll see is some consolidation in the marketplace. It's also ripe for very focused retailers with strong brands and strong products to come into this market. So there might be some consolidation, there might be some new entrants.
The report says that not enough shoe shops follow fashion, and in my experience buying shoes is a bit like buying the first Ford cars. You can have any colour as long as it's black, so it's a great relief when you can eventually find some shoes with a bit of sparkle. At Faith Shoes, they try and keep the sparkle by keeping up to date with what's in on the catwalk. They believe it helps them stay one step ahead of the competition.
The strategy of our business is to align ourselves very much with the fashion world, and we have concessions in Debenhams and Topshop where we believe people want to buy their shoes.
According to Verdict's report, a shake-up in the industry can be expected soon. The question is, will it give us on the street the footwear we really want to step out in?
And that's all the business news for today. Now it's back to John.
Thanks, Tanya. Now, one of NATO's most difficult objectives in Kosovo is to convince Serb civilians that it's safe for them now to remain in the province. This comes amid unconfirmed reports yesterday that the Kosovo Liberation Army, that's the Albanian force, killed 2 Yugoslav soldiers, a Serb policeman and a civilian in Pristina yesterday. And a Serbian priest was allegedly attacked in a village near Prizren. Well, our correspondent Paul Wood reports on how quickly or otherwise the KLA is likely to comply with any calls for disarmament.
The Albanian flag is being carried forward by the KLA through much of Kosovo. This is a sight to strike fear into the hearts of those Serbs still living in the province. The KLA's victory was largely won by NATO, but they still feel triumphant. These troops are given certificates formally confirming their KLA membership. Each certificate records a pledge to fight to the death for an independent state.
We don't accept this is going to be the end. We have much to do to our independence.
Late last week, high in the mountains, a KLA supply convoy arrives, laden with weapons and ammunition. This was just before NATO got to Kosovo, but after the peace deal was signed by the Serbs and after the ceasefire declared by all sides. The struggle for independence could now be carried on by political means alone, but KLA officials are already warning that any attempt to establish a Russian-controlled zone could reignite the conflict, and field commanders remain wary of disarmament.
We still have guns because we still have problems in Kosovo, and we're gonna have these guns till we are sure we're not gonna have another attack from Serb paramilitary or military from the Serbia.
So the Western troops still pouring in here will find a Kosovo full of guns even after the Serbian military have gone. It's a problem which is worrying NATO governments. I asked the alliance's supreme commander if he had any plan to disarm the KLA.
Well, what we're going to do is demilitarize the KLA and other armed groups. That's the name of the mission. There are some specific requirements of that that are being worked out, and General Jackson has the authority and the means necessary to do that.
But that's not enough for the Serb civilians. They're terrified of the KLA and don't think NATO can protect them from revenge attacks they believe are already underway. As their military pull out, they're following close behind. There are no Serbs left here in this part of Kosovo, the south, and it could take just a single well-publicised incident to put the rest to flight. The Serbs didn't stay in Sarajevo when NATO reunified the Bosnian capital. All the signs are that it could be a much more difficult task to keep the Serbs here in Kosovo. Paul Wood, BBC News in southern Kosovo.
Meanwhile, Yugoslav forces continue their withdrawal from Kosovo amid growing tension with NATO peacekeeping troops. There have been several violent confrontations in the province, but the build-up of NATO forces is set to continue as the political intention of bringing peace to the area becomes a military reality. Well, Lieutenant Colonel Nicolson joins us from Pristina. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, how much is this resistance actually hampering your operations?
Well, we've had, after a busy day yesterday, a reassuringly quiet night. And as you've heard, there are large numbers of Yugoslav army withdrawing to the north at the moment. And we are moving into all areas, getting troops on the ground and ensuring that we have liaison in place with all factions.
Can you clarify what the latest situation is with the Russians at the airport?
We still have a British presence at the airport, and we are continuing to negotiate on the ground command and control arrangements within KFOR.
But are you going to be setting up your headquarters elsewhere then?
Always was the intention to set up the headquarters in Pristina, and that's what we will do.
What is your feeling? Do you feel that the Russian politicians are in control of what the Russians are doing there, or is it the military?
That's not really something that I can comment on where I am at the moment. All I can talk about is the activities of our forces in Pristina and the stability that we're managing to bring to the area.
So are you happy? Are you satisfied with the level of Serb withdrawals going on at the moment?
What we wish to do is bring stability to the area as quickly as possible so that people can get on with rebuilding their lives. The VJ is withdrawing, it's withdrawing on timetable, and that is being accomplished effectively. As far as dealings with paramilitaries are concerned, we're being utterly even-handed. There were shooting incidents yesterday in Pristina, which we dealt with. And similarly, there was an incident at Kachina, which is in the south of the country, where the Gurkhas intervened when members of the KLA were firing on a house, and they desisted and handed their weapons over to the Gurkhas.
Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Nicolson, thank you for joining us.
OK, I think we should find out what's happening outside to the weather. And here's Peter Cockroft. Peter.
Thanks very much, John. Well, summer seems to have arrived at last. Down in the West Country yesterday, 14 hours of sunshine. The warmest weather was a little further up country. We saw temperatures of 22 degrees in Southampton, 21 in London. And it's a lovely sunny start to the day in London, as you can see from our camera on the roof here at Television Centre. Now, it's not quite as warm as that in the sea. I think my toes would go a very dark shade of blue. The importance of that is that as it warms up, I think, across southern parts of the country, we're going to have sea breezes developing during the afternoon, so it will be a little cooler around the coast. Now, it's not going to be sunny everywhere, alas. The strongest sunshine in the south, that's where we'll have the highest pollen levels, but we have got a lot of cloud and rain up to the north. That'll gradually fizzle out as the day goes along. Back to Sophie and John.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. And at 7 o'clock in Breakfast News, an uneasy peace hangs over Kosovo as more NATO troops move in and the Serbs continue to move out.
And into the Valley of Mummies stepped the donkey, why Egyptologists are celebrating one of their biggest ever finds. We'll have all that at 7, but first the news, travel and weather, wherever you are.
Good morning from South Today. History was made last night as the first Green candidate was elected as a member to the European Parliament. The UK Independence Party also saw 2 of their candidates become MEPs. For the 3 main parties, it was a night of mixed fortunes. The Conservatives took half of all the seats available in the South East and West, but Labour and the Liberal Democrats admitted the results for them were disappointing. Tim Burke reports.
In the South West, the Conservatives took 4 of the 7 seats available. Labour and the Liberal Democrats were disappointed with just 1 each. But the UK Independence Party were rejoicing at their first real inroad to political power. And so too in the South East. Nigel Farage is the second of the UK IP's MEPs. In the South East, the Conservatives took 5 of the 11 seats, Labour and the Liberal Democrats 2 apiece. But here, the Greens were celebrating.
It was a tense moment, but I think it's a real vindication for those hundreds of people, the thousands of people that voted Green, so we're tremendously excited. And it shows that we're on the national stage now, we're here to stay, so watch out for the next elections as well.
The Conservatives are happy that those of us who bothered to vote apparently endorse their message on Europe. Tim Burke for BBC South Today.
And there'll be a full roundup of the election results in half an hour. Other news now, the Royal Navy frigate HMS Grafton will arrive back in Portsmouth today. For the past 2 months, she's been escorting a French aircraft carrier in the Adriatic. Steve Humphrey reports.
The crew of HMS Grafton were in the front line of the conflict in the Balkans, helping to protect the French aircraft carrier Foch. The carrier's super-étendard jets carried out hundreds of bombing attacks against Serb forces. It was the first time this century that a Royal Navy warship had been under the direct command of a French admiral. Grafton's crew have been closely following every twist and turn in the conflict, and the sailors' hopes for the speedy return of refugees to Kosovo have now begun to be realised. On the way home, Grafton stopped in Alicante in Spain to give her crew a break and to allow work to be carried out on one of her engines. Steve Humphrey, BBC South Today.
A look at the travel now, and Clarendon Road, Southsea, is closed. Diversions are in place. You can, of course, keep up to date on your BBC local radio station. Finally, a look at today's weather. The early morning mist will clear to reveal a dry day across the region with some long sunny spells, hazy at times. Top temperature 21 degrees Celsius, that's 70 degrees Fahrenheit inland, but light onshore breezes will keep the coasts cooler. Looking ahead to tonight, it'll be dry with light winds but turning misty in places again as temperatures fall towards 11 degrees Celsius. And that's it from us for the moment. Join us again in half an hour.
Good morning and welcome to the BBC's Breakfast News with John Nicholson and Sophie Raworth.
Yes, good morning. The main stories. The Tories are celebrating a convincing victory in the elections for the European Parliament.
With all the results from England and Wales declared, they have 34 seats to Labour's 26.
Across Europe, there's been a swing to the right, with the centre-left losing its grip on power.
And this is the scene in Kosovo this morning. Serb forces continue to withdraw, but tension remains high and NATO forces are again being prevented from entering Pristina airport by Russian troops.
Also in the programme, why the Cricket World Cup's proving a huge hit in the Big Apple.
But first, Peter Cockroft with this morning's weather. Peter.
Thanks, Sophie. Sunny in the south today, rather cloudy and damp further north, but even here, some sunshine moving into Scotland and Northern Ireland by this evening. That's the weather. Now back to Sophie and John.
Thank you very much. Now, the Conservative Party are this morning celebrating victory in the European elections. With results in from only England and Wales so far, the Conservatives have more MEPs than any other party. Labour has lost many seats and the party's vote has fallen dramatically since the general election.
The Lib Dem vote also fell, but many smaller parties picked up seats. So far, the Conservatives have 34 MEPs, Labour 26, Lib Dems 9. The UK Independence Party took their first 3 MEPs ever. Plaid Cymru won 2 seats, as did the Greens Party. BBC forecast for the share of the vote, once all results are in, suggests that the Conservatives will be the largest party with 36% of the vote.
Labour would have 28%, the Lib Dems 13%, and other parties a total of 20%. That means that the Tories will have picked up some support since the general election, but Labour has done badly, losing up to 16% of the vote. The Lib Dems have also lost out.
For the Tories, it was smiles all round. For them, it's been a good election. And despite the derisory turnout of just 23%, the result will be a boost for William Hague's leadership and his hardline stance on the single currency.
This is the comeback Conservative Party. We have done remarkably well. We've done remarkably well here in Yorkshire and also across the country.
I, being the regional returning officer, do hereby declare...
Pushed easily into second place behind the Tories, this was a humbling experience for New Labour, who've not lost a national election since 1992. But it was in their heartlands like Wales that Labour fared worst. They got more votes than Plaid Cymru, but only just, leaving them with the same number of seats, 2 each. A time for humble pie.
Tonight, the Labour Party in Wales and elsewhere in Britain, as we've been learning from the results, has had a somewhat sobering experience.
And in Scotland, the indications are that Labour will have fared as badly at the hands of the Scottish nationalists, though the final results there aren't due until lunchtime today. Already in Labour circles, there are mutterings about a lacklustre campaign and, privately, criticism of their campaign coordinator, Margaret Beckett.
The Labour Party has fought a campaign. It didn't take off nationally. This is not an issue of whether Margaret Beckett was responsible or not. Of course not. The Labour Party must take responsibility for its campaign.
Some celebrations, but nothing wild for the Liberal Democrats. Their glass half full, half empty. More MEPs, but their share of the vote down. Even so, their outgoing leader seems satisfied.
From here, I think now that we continue to build the party over the next few years. Many congratulations to you all. It's a very good night indeed. All the best. Good night.
Some of the smaller parties did well, with the Greens getting their first 2 MEPs, the UK Independence Party their first 3. They've benefited from proportional representation. But for Labour, these results are likely only to have further weakened their already dwindling enthusiasm for PR for Westminster. Norman Smith, BBC News.
Well, across Europe, the story has been the same. Gains for centre-right parties and a low turnout. Our Europe correspondent Jonathan Beale is at the European Parliament in Brussels. Well, Jonathan, terrible night for Labour here, not great for socialist governments across Europe. What has gone wrong for them?
Well, it's certainly been a slap in the face, not just for Tony Blair, but for Chancellor Schröder as well in Germany, who had an even worse result. I think that there is a turn against the socialist groups. Remember, 11 countries are run by socialist governments, and I think there is certainly a feeling here that the voters were voting against those governments in some way, a protest vote. But obviously the European People's Party, which is a centre-right party, feels very confident. They've got 40 more seats than the Socialists. For the first time, they are the biggest party in this parliament. But having said that, I think that the background to this whole election is that for the first time, 50%, less than 50% of the electorate bothered to turn out for these elections. And really the Parliament itself has a credibility gap, if you like, when it faces the public. It certainly isn't something in the top of people's minds throughout Europe at the moment.
And with the turnout being so low, the fear must be that people literally don't take the European Parliament very seriously.
Well, I think it's certainly a danger, and that's one of the dangers that, one of the issues that the new Parliament must address. Remember, the Parliament thought it had come of age because it voted out it brought about the resignation of the Commission over the allegations of corruption. But the problem, I think, for the Parliament is that it also is perceived as being part of this gravy train image, and that's something they've got to address. Now, one of the first issues is looking at their expenses, their generous expenses allowances. MEPs before this election refused to change their generous expenses, and I think that's one of the first issues, the new intake of MEPs, they must look at and change.
Jonathan Beale in Brussels, thank you. And now to our political editor, Robin Oakley. Good morning.
Good morning.
What has gone wrong for Labour then?
I think some of their own supporters feel that they have neglected the traditional core Labour support in their efforts to go out and attract, as it were, the middle ground support of Middle England. They've gone, as it were, too much for Daily Mail readers and not enough for Mirror readers. I think, secondly, the government were complacent. They imagined they could coast through a European Parliament elections campaign by turning it into a referendum on their own performance, saying, well, we're 20 points ahead in the opinion polls, people seem to like what we're doing, we're meeting some of our election pledges, we're not doing badly. Tony Blair's leadership is popular, he's being an effective war leader in Kosovo, surely that's enough to get us through. Against that, the Tories fought a very focused, neatly targeted campaign with a catchy slogan, in Europe, not run by Europe, and that clearly appealed to people, and it actually was an election about Europe.
And interestingly, there have been some gains for smaller parties, UK Independence Party, for example, the Greens, which UK Independence will certainly worry William Hague.
Significant breakthrough for the UK Independence Party, certainly, and the Tories were saying last night that they hadn't quite had the plug in the bath. They were losing some votes out to people like the UK Independence Party, but luckily they were able to turn on the tap and pull votes in from other people to more than make up for that. William Hague now has a real test. Does he's been trying to sort of pull people into the Tory party, making it more inclusive, making it a softer, gentler conservatism on most policy issues. On Europe, he's taken a hardline, right-wing, Eurosceptic stance. Now, his hardliners will now say to him, look how well you've done by being a hardliner, make it more hardline for the general election. The danger there is that he frightens off a lot of middle ground voters who they have to pull across in a general election. So if he goes too much the UKIP way, he may suffer for it in the long term.
Robin Oakley, thank you.
Now to Kosovo, and residents of the capital, Pristina, are waking up this morning expecting another tension-filled day as the NATO standoff with the Russians at the airport continues. The Kosovo Liberation Army have soldiers already camped in a suburban school in the capital.
It's been a tense night in Pristina, but British NATO troops have been on patrol. Their mission is to prevent the unsteady peace from breaking out into a new wave of violence. The presence of the alliance soldiers has been enough to convince ethnic Albanians that after so many weeks it's safe to walk the streets. For the Serbs who live here, though, this is their nightmare, and they're afraid not just of NATO, but also of the Kosovo Liberation Army, which has moved back into the capital. The sight of KLA guards openly standing outside a school which seems to have become a temporary barracks is remarkable. 2 days ago, for these men to appear on the streets would have meant certain death. It looks like being another day of tension at Pristina airfield. The Russians who got there before the British parachute regiment still have control. They say they're part of the international presence here, KFOR, but so far they've proved unwilling to fall into line with NATO commanders who want the British paras here, the Russians elsewhere. The negotiations to find a settlement are still continuing. It's not proving easy. Outside Pristina, Kosovo is still proving a hazardous and unpredictable place. A German journalist who'd been shot and critically wounded received first aid in a British Army vehicle before being flown out to a field hospital. The 2 colleagues he was travelling with were killed. It's not clear who attacked their car on a lonely rural road or why they did it. All of this goes to underline the fact that Kosovo remains a very dangerous place, and it's not only hazardous for the NATO forces here. It's also very dangerous for the hundreds of thousands of refugees who are now so anxious to get back to their homes. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, with the British forces in Kosovo.
And we can now go live to our correspondent Clive Murray, who is in Prizren. Clive, what's the situation been like overnight?
Tense. In a word, Sophie, very tense indeed. We've seen a lot of military activity, certainly on the part of the NATO peacekeeping troops who are here, and also activity from the Serbian paramilitaries, the special forces, soldiers and the police. They've been moving out of Prizren here north, heading towards Serbia throughout the night in huge convoys of lorries, trying to keep up with the timetable set under the Kosovo peace deal, by which all Serb forces have to be out of this area by midnight tomorrow. The hope from NATO's point of view certainly is that they'll keep to that timetable, and once they do that, the tension will decrease here.
But is there very much a sense now that NATO troops are entirely in control of that area?
Certainly in control, entirely in control. No one really knows, because there's no real estimate as to how many Serb forces, Serb soldiers and so on are still here. We saw many Serb soldiers on our way to this live position this morning, still hanging around, but we did see lorries moving on the road here, heading north, as I say, towards Serbia. Yesterday, the German NATO peacekeepers certainly made their presence felt. They fired back at 2 Serb civilians who attacked them with rifle shots, and they killed one of the Serb civilians. They're making it clear that they're in control, and they're making it clear that they're not going to stand for any violence, certainly from the Serb civilian population, as well as the Serb forces who may still be here.
Clive Murray in Prizren, thank you.
And of course we'll come back to our correspondents in Kosovo later in the programme. Now some domestic news. New plans will be announced today to halve the number of teenage pregnancies in the UK over the next 10 years. A major publicity campaign, new sex education lessons in schools and hostels for some teenage mothers are amongst the measures being considered. The plans are based on a report from the government's Social Exclusion Unit and will be revealed by the Prime Minister later this morning.
Sam Jones is 16. She became pregnant when she was still at school and had to leave before completing her education. Looking after her daughter Danielle means coping with a lot more than other girls her age have to.
It's difficult because you can't do what you want to do. You can't wake up in the morning and think, oh, I think I just lay in this morning. Wake up and think, right, I've got to go and get Danielle, she's crying. What shall I give Danielle? What shall she wear today?
Sam's story is not unusual. The UK has the highest rate of teenage pregnancies in Western Europe. Today, the government will announce practical measures to tackle the problem. These are expected to include a major publicity campaign spelling out the harsh reality of life as a teenage mother. Boys will be targeted by the Child Support Agency to pay for any children they father, and teenage mothers will be put in hostels if they're not looked after at home.
Condoms which are considered to be safe to use in this country have got the British...
These pupils from a South London comprehensive are being taught about sex by the school nurse. The government wants to see more of this kind of approach, where the emphasis is on how to form relationships and resist pressure to have sex early.
You're not promoting promiscuity or underage sex. What you are promoting is responsibility and negotiating skills and being able to say no.
Simply telling young people not to have sex is regarded as counterproductive. Instead, they'll be encouraged to change their behaviour. But ministers are aware there's only so much the government can do to achieve this. Chris Hogg, BBC News.
Archaeologists in Egypt, aided by a donkey, have discovered a burial ground they believe could contain up to 10,000 mummies. It will be the largest find of mummies ever recorded. The tombs were found at the Bahariya Oasis, more than 200 miles southwest of Cairo. They include the mummies of wealthy and powerful people who lived over 2,000 years ago.
The desert southwest of Cairo has been renamed the Valley of the Mummies. Unearthing them has been a painstaking process. So far, 105 have been found. Many are resting on open surfaces, their golden masks in immaculate condition. Others remain unexamined, wrapped in linen or locked inside terracotta coffins.
The discovery is very important because it gives us idea about daily life and also about the religious significance in the Roman period.
Some of the mummies have now been taken to Cairo for further examination while the excavation continues. If this does turn out to be the world's largest discovery of mummies, archaeologists will have a donkey to thank. They were led to the tombs when the animal accidentally slipped and fell into the burial ground. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
Well, it's 7:15, and coming up in the next hour, a lot of hot air or a political landmark. Peter Snow is here with his expert guide to the winners and losers in last night's European elections.
And why can't men look after themselves? A campaign has started to make them more aware of their health. But first, the end of hostilities in Kosovo has not meant an end to the human crisis. Neighbours who once lived peacefully may now find it impossible to live side by side. And as NATO advances and the Albanians return, it's the Serbs who feel terrified and are fleeing their homes.
In any other part of the world, it would be cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. But these are the back streets of Pristina. Serb children play soldiers. It's them against the Albanians. You're KLA, he says, under arrest. The enmities run deep and start early. Even the youngest here are tainted by ancient fears and hatreds. It will be generations before Kosovo is at peace. The cafe is full for the first time in 2.5 months. Now NATO is here, the Albanians have come out of their hiding places. Some thought they were the only ones of their kind left in Pristina, so complete was their isolation. Now, as they eat and drink, old friends arrive, friends they feared were dead or gone.
People used to rather not show up, especially men and younger women. Today we see everybody, simply everybody. We see people we have seen for months.
While Albanians rediscover their city, many Serbs are leaving it. It is another mass exodus. They travel however they can with whatever they can carry, the carpets and television sets, the washing machines, the clothes and toys which filled their family homes. And with their weapons. There are few male Serbs of fighting age who were not called up. Others took up arms voluntarily. And the Kosovo that became intolerable for so many Albanians has become uncomfortable for them. Jovan Matic was a farmer, then a fighter, and is now a refugee. I don't know where I'm going, he said. I'm just taking the most important things for me and my family. The presence of NATO has changed things here. Many Serbs are fearful and they're leaving. But the Albanians say they have been liberated from their hiding places of the last 2.5 months. Michael Williams, BBC News, Pristina.
Well, our correspondent Jeremy Cook joins us now. He's with the British military just outside the Kosovo capital, Pristina. Good morning. The Serbs, as we see there in that piece, are leaving the country in substantial numbers. Are they right to be frightened?
Well, I don't think they're right to be frightened of NATO forces. I don't think there's any threat there, although there may be a perceived threat. But I think the real problem for the Serb population here is what happens to the Kosovo Liberation Army, the ethnic Albanian fighters who we can expect to be coming down from the hills in the next days and weeks. And maybe looking for revenge for what they see as atrocities committed against their people.
Now, there's been some criticism. Sorry, I was going to say there's been some criticism of NATO forces not being even-handed, disarming Serb militiamen, but not disarming the KLA guerrillas.
Yeah, and that's something which the Serbs are complaining about. But what NATO here on the ground is saying to us is, look, there are incidents where we have had to move in to stop the Kosovo Liberation Army doing things which are inappropriate. For instance, yesterday, a house in the south of Kosovo came under fire from the KLA. Members of the Gurkha regiment, the British Gurkhas, who were down in that area, moved in. They took the weapons from the Kosovo Liberation Army fighters and diffused the situation. So NATO on the ground here would stress very much that they're trying desperately to treat both sides with equity.
Jeremy, thank you.
And back now to the European elections. Both in Britain and across Europe, centre-right parties are celebrating gains in the European elections. The BBC's elections analyst, Peter Snow, has been looking at the results in his own inimitable style.
Well, here's our forecast of the final share of the vote in this, the best election, the best national election for the Conservatives since 1992. 36% the share for the Tories, 28% for Labour, a whole 8% behind the Tories, 13% the Lib Dems, down 4%, a bad result for them, down 4% on their general election result, and 20% the others. A lot of other seats popping in. And here we have then the change from 1997 for Labour, and you can see how terribly badly they've done, particularly in the north of the country, their vote dropping way down there, holding up a little bit better as you come down here to the south of England, where the Tories normally do well. There's Labour holding up quite well there in the south. But otherwise, a collapse of the Labour vote in the north, and there's strongholds in the north. Now into the swingometer, just to show you the effect of this extraordinary swing. There are the Conservative MPs over there, there are the Labour MPs over here. If there were any kind of general election in the near future, and the swing like this was repeated, the Labour majority of 179 would turn into a very considerable disaster for Labour, because the 11.5% swing the Conservatives need for a majority of one, which the Conservatives haven't begun to approach in the last couple of years, is now looking like a Conservative swing of 10.5%, within a whisker of that sort of goalpost that they're looking for, and that hasn't seemed within their reach in the last couple of years. Now the European Parliament itself, there's the big chamber, a brand new building that they're in now, and here we just quickly sweep around it and look at the new pattern of power in this new European Parliament chamber. And the interesting thing is that the balance has slightly shifted. There over on the left there you can see the Socialist group there, 198 of them forecast, 37 down on where they were in the old House. And on the centre right, including the British Conservatives, we have 249 up 14. So that is the basic shift there, a little bit of a shift from the left to the right. And now we're able just to take a look at the swing. What that swing represents, that shift right the way across, is the whole of Europe, and we've adopted the European Parliament's own hot air balloon, which they tried to publicise this Parliament campaign with. And we put all the leaders in this hot air balloon. We're going to send it up now, fire the flame, up she goes. We're going to put it way above the skies of Europe and just see where, when you weigh up all the pluses and minuses of all the parties in this European parliamentary election, how it has changed from 1994. Now here's our centre line there, the centre line down there, and you can see the balloon swinging across to the right, because most of these governments are on the whole centre-left governments, including, of course, Tony Blair's. It's a swing to the right of some 2% since 1994.
I don't know, these graphics are getting madder and madder. He was ducking there. Now, both in Great Britain and across Europe, centre-left parties have lost ground in the European elections. I'm joined now to make sense of all of this by two experts on voting patterns, Professor Tony King of Essex University, who's analysed the results here in the UK, and Anne-Marie Le Gloanac of the Mark Bloch Institute in Berlin, who's going to explain what it all means in European terms. Can I start off with you, Professor King? Obviously, William Hague's going to be highly delighted this morning that he's done so well. But is it all good news for him? I mean, shouldn't he have been capturing these UK Independence Party votes since he ran such a strongly Eurosceptic campaign?
Well, there'll be two things he has in mind. One is that, as Robin Oakley said a moment ago, there was that chap at Conservative Central Office last night saying, well, the tap was running in, but we were losing a few votes down the plug hole. However, not everybody who voted for the UK Independence Party would have voted Tory if they hadn't voted for that party. There are an awful lot of people at the moment who are saying, in effect, none of the above. And the Greens are one beneficiary, so is the UK Independence Party. The other thing to bear in mind is simply the Conservatives undoubtedly benefited from the very low turnout. If turnout had been double or treble what it was, the Conservatives wouldn't have done so well.
And would the Conservatives, were there to be a general election, give the country a hung parliament, as Peter Snow's graphics there were perhaps playfully suggesting?
I don't think so. These were Euro elections. There was that very low turnout. I think if there were a general election next week, the Labour Party would win it.
In European terms, what are we to read into this? What does it mean in the various countries where left-wing governments saw their opponents triumph?
Well, you have a number of reasons for that. One is dioxin, for instance, the latest scandal in Belgium.
So people are angry about food in Belgium?
They are angry about food, and the Greens in Belgium have done fairly well. You have people in Greece, for instance, who have voted against the Socialist Party in power because they were furious that the Socialist Party was sort of siding with NATO, for
So we're not
instance.
seeing Europeans voting on a European basis. We're seeing people sticking to national areas, national concerns. Is that what we're seeing?
Yes, exactly. I mean, you don't have a European Parliament which is going to produce a European government. There is here a clear gap. So people don't know what they are voting for. They are voting for a European Parliament, but they are voting at the same time for national governments, which is the difference.
Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.
And now, 26 minutes past 7, time for a look at the weather with Peter Cockroft. Peter.
Thanks, Sophie. Well, they had the best of the sunshine down in the West Country yesterday, and I think that's where it's going to be sunny again today. The strongest sunshine probably across in the Channel Islands. Sun index of 7, that means the sun's going to be particularly strong, but you need to match that with your skin type to get an idea of just how long you can stay out in the sun to be safe, and you can do that by taking a look at CFAX page 408. Not sunny everywhere, as you can see. A lot of cloud up to the north, and it has been delivering some rain. You can see we've had some rain through Northern Ireland overnight, western side of Scotland, moving on to the eastern side of Scotland now. A few little bits of drizzly rain around some of the hills and coasts of the Irish Sea. But I think throughout the day, the best of the sunshine is going to be across the southern half of England and Wales. Sea breezes setting in during the afternoon, so a little bit cooler around the coast and some cloud building up around those coastal regions. By the afternoon into the evening, we'll find some brighter weather getting into the far northwest of the British Isles. But the best of the sun, as I said, is going to be in the south. Back to John and Sophie.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Now we'll have plenty more in the next half hour. Rob Bonnet will be back with all the sports news. We'll also be taking a look at the papers.
But first, the news wherever you are this morning.
Good morning to you from South Today. The Green and UK Independence parties are still celebrating their victories in last night's European elections. In the South East, 11 MEPs were elected. In the South West, there are 7. The UK Independence Party, which advocates total withdrawal from Europe, now has 2 MEPs. In the South East, the top 5 on the Conservatives list were elected. Labour gained 2 seats, as did the Liberal Democrats. The Green Party gained 1 seat, and Nigel Farage was voted in as MEP for the UK Independence Party. In the South West, the Conservatives dominated the evening. They gained 4 of the 7 seats up for election. Labour gained 1 seat, as did Graham Watson for the Liberal Democrats. Michael Holmes, the leader of the UK Independence Party, took a seat too. To reiterate, the UK Independence Party, which advocates total withdrawal from Europe, now has 2 MEPs to represent their views. Tim Burke reports from the South East Count at Winchester.
It was the night of the miners' strike. It was the Greens and the UK Independence parties which had something to celebrate. This is the man who wants his time as an MEP to be as short as possible. He wants a divorce from Europe and all that it means. To ask him if he's looking forward to the job is, for once, a difficult question.
That is a hard question to answer. Yes, I am looking forward to it. I'm particularly looking forward to meeting the Danes, the French, the Swedes. I'm looking forward to meeting the other people who believe in independent nation-states governing themselves but cooperating and trading. That's the thing that I would really enjoy.
The Greens were looking sickly until the last moment, unsure that their 110,000 vote would secure them a seat. But for the first time, they wield real effective power.
It was a tense moment, but I think it's a real vindication for those hundreds of people, the thousands of people that voted Green, so we're tremendously excited. And it shows that we're on the national stage now, we're here to stay, so watch out for the next elections as well.
Last night, 11 MEPs were returned in a region which now extends from Milton Keynes right down to the outer reaches of Kent, despite the fact that only 1 in 4 of us bothered to vote. Tim Burke for BBC South Today in Winchester.
In the southwest, the Conservatives dominated the evening, gaining 4 of the 7 seats available. The UK Independence Party were also celebrating another win. Michael Holmes is now one of the 2 MEPs in the south who advocates total withdrawal from Europe. Paul Cannon reports.
Candidates and supporters gathered in the main hall as the story of the night began to emerge. Very good news for the Conservatives. They had beaten the Liberal Democrats even in Paddy Ashdown's Yeovil constituency, and in that of the woman who hopes to succeed him as party leader, Taunton's Jackie Ballard.
Only 30% of the people voted in the Euro elections on Thursday. At a general election last time, 80% of people voted in my constituency. And I'm pretty certain that most of the people who didn't vote were Liberal Democrat voters.
The 7 new MEPs gathered together for the first time. One of them was the leader of the UK Independence Party, Michael Holmes, now elected to a parliament he wants to take Britain out of.
Absolutely. And the reason is that if we'd have stood at these elections and said we weren't going to take the seats, we wouldn't have got the votes.
Among the new Conservative MEPs now representing the South West is Lord Stockton, grandson of the former Prime Minister Harold Macmillan. As winners and losers left to celebrate or to drown their sorrows, the returning officers' staff quietly toasted their own success in running this first proportional and high-tech election.
On to other news now. A 17-year-old boy has died after being found with extensive injuries near the pier in Southsea. Hampshire police have launched an investigation into how Martin Granger from Borth End in Portsmouth was injured. He was found opposite South Parade Pier at the junction with Clarendon Road late last night. He was taken to hospital but later died. One of the most historic buildings in the south is once again open to the public. The £5 million renovation of Highcliffe Castle near Christchurch proved controversial. Objectors thought the building would become a white elephant, but castle managers say it's already being used for conferences, exhibitions and wedding receptions. A look at the travel now, and Clarendon Road Southsea has been reopened. In Berkshire, on the B3345 Reading Bridge, roadworks are in force, closing 1 lane southbound. Expect delays there. Finally, a look at today's weather. The early morning mist will clear to reveal a dry day across the region with some long sunny spells, hazy at times. Top temperature we can expect 21 degrees Celsius, that's 70 degrees Fahrenheit inland. Onshore breezes will keep coasts cooler. And that's it from us for the moment. Do join us again in half an hour when we'll have another roundup from the region. Goodbye.
Good morning and welcome back to the BBC's Breakfast News programme. The headlines so far this morning: the Tories are celebrating victory in the European elections. Minority parties also did well. The Greens won 2 seats and the UK Independence Party picked up 3. Liberal Democrats have 9 and in Wales Plaid Cymru won 2. The results from Scotland and Northern Ireland will be announced later today. Across the rest of Europe, as in the UK, voter apathy took hold in most countries. But with nearly all the results counted across the European Union, it appears that after 20 years of domination by the centre-left, the centre-right has now gained control of the European Parliament. Yugoslav forces are continuing their withdrawal from Kosovo as the NATO peacekeeping force braces itself for more resistance. Yesterday, British and German troops were involved in armed confrontations in the province. And talks will continue today to try and break the standoff between NATO and Russian forces who've blockaded the road to Pristina airport. So let's catch up with the sport. Here's Rob.
Thanks, John. Good morning to you. Well, Tim Henman renews his sporting rivalry with friend Pete Sampras again today, and this time he should win. And that's because Henman, with a handicap of just 3, is a better golfer than Sampras. They meet on a course near Henman's South London home just 24 hours after their Stella Artois tennis final at Queen's Club yesterday. An evenly balanced 3-setter, won on a tie-break by Sampras, who's amongst those agreeing with Henman's assessment of himself that he'll be tough to beat when Wimbledon starts a week today.
If it wasn't for Pete Sampras, Tim Henman might well have won Wimbledon already. It's the British #1's misfortune that his career has coincided with that of arguably the greatest grass court player ever. In fact, Henman has never beaten Sampras on any surface, but at least he'll go into Wimbledon after coming close in yesterday's Stella Artois final. He won the first set tiebreak 7-1, a margin which indicates Henman is closing the gap on the great American. But a gap there still is. An early break in the second allowed Sampras to draw level before the decider also went to a tie-break. A tiny error against Sampras can prove fatal. Henman failed to kill a high volley and was made to pay with a perfect lob. The break had been won and the match and championship quickly followed.
He's so strong. I mean, I really see him one day winning Wimbledon. He's got a lot of talent, and I think this country should be real proud of Tim Henman because he's going to be around for a lot of years.
The problem for Henman is that Sampras is likely to be around for a few years as well. Ben Munro-Davis, BBC News.
Well, now an object lesson for cricketers tempted to celebrate a catch before they've shown the umpire they've properly taken it. Herschel Gibbs' premature moment of triumph probably cost South Africa their thrilling World Cup game against Australia at Headingley yesterday. Despite South African appeals, Steve Waugh, then on 56, survived and continued towards a brilliant 120 and an Australian 5-wicket win with just 2 balls remaining. Later, Waugh said his innings was as good as any he'd ever played. And that result leaves the final Super 6 table looking like this. India and Zimbabwe go out. Pakistan meet New Zealand in one semi-final on Wednesday. That's at Old Trafford. South Africa and Australia will meet again in the other on Thursday at Edgbaston. World champion Mika Häkkinen is back on top of the Formula 1 Drivers' Championship this morning, courtesy of a rare error by Michael Schumacher, whose Ferrari was leading Häkkinen by 4 seconds when he crashed during lap 32. The safety car had to be brought out 4 times altogether during the race, including on the very last lap, and only 10 cars finished. The other drivers on the podium at the end were Giancarlo Fisichella in second place, Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari was third. But here's a crash which Scotland's Peter Dumbrick has admitted he's lucky to survive. There were 5 somersaults altogether as his Mercedes flipped into the air and off the circuit during the Le Mans 24-hour race over the weekend. Dumbrick's recollection of the incident: "I was getting closer and closer to the sky," he said, "and I thought this could be the end. Then I saw the trees and that was even worse. I knew if I crashed through the branches it would be fatal." Well, fortunately, he emerged unhurt. The race eventually was won by BMW. Finally, Bradford Bulls are the new leaders of Rugby League's Super League. They beat struggling Hull Sharks by 42 points to 14, enough to take them to the top after St Helens' defeat by Gateshead. The Castleford Tigers are now 5th in the table after beating the Warrington Wolves by 39 points to 6. Centre Francis Maloney scoring a hat-trick of tries on his return from injury, this against one of his former clubs. That's the sport. We're back again at 8:30, but now the papers with John and Sophie, I think.
Rob, thank you very much indeed. The front page of The Guardian this morning: a joyous welcome from the living, a grisly reminder from the dead. Pictured here, ethnic Albanians greeting British troops who arrived in Kosovo's capital, Pristina, yesterday.
Yes, all the papers, as you'd expect, lead with almost identical headlines and very similar pictures. There we are, the front page of the Times. Roses and chocolates as paras liberate Pristina.
This is a picture that's in many of the papers this morning. A Serb plainclothes military policeman who was shot dead in a Pristina street after firing at troops, British troops. They shot him when he refused to drop his weapon.
Yes, the Daily Mirror has got the same picture. Very grim picture there. Shootout, paras kill Serb policeman as he opens fire in the street. The Sun's of course got the other big story, which is from Kosovo, which is the Russians and NATO forces head to head. The Russians refusing to allow the NATO forces, their supposed allies, into Pristina airport.
And the Euro elections, of course, also covered extensively in the papers. Tories make big gains in Euro poll. William Hague, Euro will be central to the next election. The Labour Party is preparing for its biggest electoral setback under Tony Blair's leadership, as it became clear that the Tories had made big gains.
Another story, of course, which is in lots and lots of the papers, is that first interview. I'm sure it's not the first interview.
Did you see it?
I didn't, sadly. I just couldn't stay awake late enough to see it.
Of course.
And there we have. Sophie says, "Please don't make me the new Di." Although rather confusingly, she says that when she sees photographs of herself, she often can't tell whether it's her or Princess Diana.
Well, there you go.
Which must be very confusing.
Very confusing indeed. Well, Lauren Booth is going to be here in an hour's time with her review of this morning's papers. But first, an update of this morning's main story from John.
It is now, what time is it? It's 7:39, almost 7:40. Our main story this morning, the Conservatives are celebrating victory in the European elections. With all the English and Welsh results in, they have more MEPs than any other party. Labour have lost many seats and their vote is well down on the general election. The Lib Dem vote also fell, but many smaller parties picked up seats.
Now, if you're a man, pay attention because it's Men's Health Week, and today a new campaign is being launched to raise awareness of male cancers. It's the latest in a number of attempts to try to interest men in their own health. Doctors say they're far worse than women at looking after their bodies. Well, our health correspondent James Westhead has been finding out why.
Being a man is seriously bad for your health. We get sick more, we die younger, and worst of all, we don't seem to care.
There's a macho thing about you're not healthy, you can work hard, you can do loads of hours at work, and you won't go down with any illness.
They think it's a woman's thing. Yeah, they think it's not masculine enough to be seen in the gym.
And they certainly pay more attention than they used to, but I think probably nowhere near as much as women maybe.
A new campaign launched today will try and persuade men of the risk of testicular and other male cancers. Mirroring the pink ribbon of women's health campaigns, it's the latest in a series of attempts to interest men in their health.
I think men are notoriously bad at checking themselves out and being informed about their health. They don't seem to think that anything will ever happen to them. And I think there's this macho feeling that it's not really cool to be worried about your body, basically.
More and more men are getting down the gym and working out. But their motivation isn't getting healthy, it's looking good. It seems when it comes to health messages, we men just don't want to listen.
Hello.
In Birmingham, one nurse became so frustrated trying to get men to go to the doctors, she's brought the surgery to them, offering instant health checkups down the pub.
Perhaps we ought to look at places like pubs and bars and workplaces, betting offices, the racetrack. Places that men go socially, where they feel at ease and comfortable. The blood pressure doesn't go up because they've smelt antiseptic lotion.
GPs agree there is a problem. Women visit the doctor twice as often as men, and when men finally do visit, it can be too late.
Men see themselves very much mechanistic. They see themselves as a head on top of a machine, whereas women are much more holistic and see themselves as a whole body. They also can talk to other women about their health. Men find it very difficult to talk about particularly emotional issues or sexual issues to their peers.
There are signs of attitudes changing. Magazines on men's health are booming. The latest features an 18-stone builder called Fizzo. The magazine found Stephen Jobson's physical work kept him fit as an athlete, despite an unhealthy diet of curry and beer.
Well, they're doing their best to get us interested in our health and that, but, you know, when you've got the alternatives, sitting down talking about your health, or going to the pub and getting pissed and having a good laugh with the lads, you know, I'm afraid. There's nothing more interesting than that at the moment, isn't it? And health is just a by-the-by thing.
Health campaigners know it'll take a while, but eventually men will catch up in the one area where they're less equal than women. James Westhead, BBC News.
And it's coming up to 7:45. Now back now to the situation in Kosovo, because NATO's task of keeping the peace in Kosovo continues to be a complex one. The standoff with the Russians at Pristina airport goes on, and elsewhere in the province, troops have encountered sniper fire. Well, for the very latest, we're joined now from Brussels by NATO spokesman Jamie Shea. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Now, what is the very latest as far as the situation with the Russians at the airport is concerned?
Well, it's certainly not a standoff. It's true that the Russians are there, but NATO forces are there too. And General Jackson, the NATO commander, has held several discussions with his Russian counterpart. The relations are very cordial. And General Jackson will today begin to work out arrangements, temporary arrangements, whereby the Russian troops that have arrived can be folded into KFOR, this NATO-led force. We can work out command arrangements, and they will get us through until such time as the political leaders of Russia and NATO work out lasting arrangements for how Russia is going to participate in this force.
You say relations are cordial, but the Russians are blocking the way for British soldiers.
Well, certainly the Russians, I've been awaiting some instructions from Moscow, but yesterday there was a lot of diplomacy going on. The US Deputy Secretary of State Strobe Talbot was in Moscow. President Clinton spoke to President Yeltsin. That was a very positive discussion. President Clinton is going to speak today again to President Yeltsin. Robin Cook spoke to the Russian Foreign Minister. So there's a lot of bilateral diplomacy, and the Russians now are being increasingly willing to reach, as I say, an immediate arrangement to put themselves under the NATO, at least a NATO command on a temporary basis, so we can have some coordination arrangements, and then later on we'll work out as I said, a durable solution for how Russia in the long run will fit into the force.
And how do you think that could be? I mean, there's been talk of them having a zone of with their own responsibility. What does that actually mean?
Well, we do not believe that the best way forward is to give the Russians, and just the Russians, a whole chunk of Kosovo, because the whole purpose of this force is to be a unified force with a unified command in which NATO soldiers would be in all of the sectors, and the same procedures, the same arrangements would apply throughout. So, that's extremely important.
So the Russians would never be in command, entirely in command of their own sector?
That's not what we foresee, no. We obviously want to find a good role for the Russians. They're an important country. They want to play a key role in the force. We've invited them to join the force. So it's a question of working out what tasks, what functions they would fulfill, what area of responsibility they would have, but not as part of a go-it-alone strategy, but as part of an integrated force, obeying the same essential command arrangements. As I've said, yesterday's talks were very fruitful, and I think we're now heading towards a solution.
There have been a few questions raised about who actually is in control of the soldiers who are in Kosovo at the moment. As far as you're concerned, is it the politicians in Moscow or is it the military?
Well, I believe it's obviously the politicians in Moscow, and yesterday, as I said, we had several conversations with them. They have given us some assurances, which I think are very important, that first of all, they want to be part of the KFOR. They don't want to have some kind of independent operation to the one that we're running. It's simply a question of having the coordination arrangements. Secondly, that they're not going to send any further forces to join the Russians already there until such time as the arrangements have been worked out. So as I say, I think that after perhaps some of the surprises of the last few days, discussions are on track, and I'm sure we'll find a very good solution for how the Russians will join us soon.
How important is the site of Pristina airport for NATO?
It's not of great importance, quite frankly. We never intended to use it in the early stages of the operation. As you know, all of the NATO forces have been entering through the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia or Albania, essentially by land or by helicopter. And the fact that we haven't had the full use of Pristina Airport in the first 48, 72 hours has not prevented us from deploying well over 10,000 NATO forces, and very rapidly, even ahead of schedule in most areas. So we're folding out across Kosovo. We're beginning to provide security to the population. We're making it clear, as you've seen overnight, that we're a force that will be respected. We will not tolerate anybody opening fire on us. We have very robust rules of engagement. And this deployment now is going full steam ahead.
OK, Jamie Shea, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by the Foreign Secretary, Robin Cook, who's in central London. Good morning, Foreign Secretary.
Good morning.
What are you saying to angry British commanders who find themselves locked out of Pristina Airport by Russian soldiers?
Well, we have been in constant contact with General Jackson, and General Jackson, as he said this morning, can certainly handle the situation. We don't need the airport. The Russians actually can't use the airport, and General Jackson and his troops are getting on with a very important job of securing the ceasefire across Kosovo. And those troops at the airport have not prevented them from doing that. I think we've got to keep some perspective on this. There are 200 Russian troops around the airport. There are now over 10,000 NATO troops, many of them British, across the whole of Kosovo. So we're not in any way threatened at the present time. Later today, General Jackson will be meeting the Russian commander, and they'll be working out arrangements by which those troops from Russia are integrated into the overall peacekeeping force.
But Mr. Cook, we've got a situation where the foreign minister of Russia says that the troop arrival at the airport's unfortunate, they'll be moving out. Then we find out that actually President Yeltsin has authorised them to stay where they are. Who's in command of the Russian forces in Kosovo?
I think some of those questions are for the Russian government and not for me. But
what do you feel?
What's very important, I think, for us is that we encourage and support and deal with those forces in the Russian government who do want to make a success of our relationship, and who do want to make a success of the peacekeeping force inside Kosovo. Now, I've had a very full exchange with Igor Ivanov. He has given me assurances that no more Russian troops will be moving without prior agreement, and there will be no more surprises. We'll be holding the Russian government to that commitment, and I have to say, in the 24 hours since then, they have done so.
Mr. Cook, perhaps I can move on to look briefly at the European elections. They were obviously a bit of a disaster for the Labour Party. Do you think the government took the electorate for granted?
No, most certainly not. I mean, there was a vigorous campaign, and I ran regular press conferences. We put out probably more election in this election than in many recent elections.
That's all the more worrying then, isn't it?
No, well, if John, I'm answering your question, I may say you can't suddenly change the question. So we did take it vigorously, but there is a real problem in which the electorate do not yet connect the European Parliament with their daily lives. They don't understand the extent to which it does have an impact on them. And I think that's an issue that will have to be addressed by the European Parliament, not just in the context of an election, but in the context of the next 4 years up until the next European elections, to make sure that they maintain a profile throughout that parliament.
But Mr. Cook,
and explain to people why voting is important.
But Mr. Cook, obviously you're answering one question, which is the question of apathy, and clearly there was apathy and not many people voted. But those who did vote obviously were not supporting the Labour Party in as high numbers as you would have hoped.
Yes, but you have to keep that in the perspective of the turnout. Less than a quarter of the electorate voted on this occasion. The next general election, 3 times as many will vote. And I do think that the Conservative Party will be mistaken if they get triumphalist on the basis that they turned out a total of 9% of the entire electorate of Britain to vote Conservative. I think that the support for the Labour Party is very strong, very sound. The support for the Labour government is very sound. And I don't think that people imagined for 1 minute that in voting this election they were voting against the government of Britain.
What about the Prime Minister's support for Margaret Beckett? Is that very sound? Because there's been much criticism of the fact that she was in charge of the campaign but went on holiday during it. Do you think her position is secure?
Margaret Beckett ran a vigorous and strong campaign, and I'm quite sure she has the full confidence of the Prime Minister.
It wasn't a successful campaign, though, was it? I mean, on that basis, you wouldn't like to see a campaign like that, surely, run for the Westminster Parliament, would you?
I wouldn't like to see a turnout like that for the Westminster Parliament, and I'm absolutely confident there will not be a turnout like that for the Westminster Parliament. As I said, 3 times as many more people will vote for that Westminster elections, and I'm quite confident that they will vote for the return of the Labour government in Britain, in which all the polls show they have great confidence and great support. They knew this election was not about that government in Westminster, and I think that perhaps politicians of all parties failed to get across the message just how important the European Parliament is and how important elections to it are.
Mr. Cook, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, this morning the Tories are celebrating their successes in the European elections, the first national electoral contest in this country to be held under proportional representation. Our reporter Susanna Reid is in Winchester to find out what 3 successful MEPs make of the results in the country's largest electoral region. Susanna.
Yes, good morning from the Guildhall in Winchester on a gloriously sunny day. Now, this was the main counting centre for the UK's largest region under that new system of PR, and the result here kind of largely reflected the national picture in that the Conservatives won the majority of the vote here, then Labour came in with the second largest proportion of the vote, and they were followed then by the Liberal Democrats. Now, before the election, it wouldn't have taken a genius to point out that we Britons are reluctant Europeans, but the election turnout proves that point. 3/4 of those eligible to vote didn't even bother. So I don't want to take the wind out of the sails of these 3 successful MEPs, but first, James Provan from the Tories, congratulations. But what kind of a mandate do you have to go and represent the electorate at the European Parliament?
Well, I think 44% of the total vote is significant. I think the proportional representation system put an awful lot of people off. And I believe that our slogan, which was "In Europe, not run by Europe," had a resonance with the people. And a lot of people didn't want to come and vote against it because they actually agreed with it. And this is a defining moment in British politics. It's about decentralisation rather than over-centralisation.
Okay. Now, Peter Skinner from the Labour Party, it's certainly a defining moment for the Labour Party because, frankly, it was a disastrous night for the Labour Party over the whole of the country, wasn't it?
I think it was a victory for apathy, actually. I think that many voters didn't turn out, as you say. It's such a low poll, it's very disappointing indeed. I think we've got a long way to go to convince people about the need to examine Europe in all its forms as well, the positive, not just the warts. And we've certainly got a lot of ground to make up in that respect. And over the next 5 years, I hope we can do that.
Now, how do you respond to the fact that you just didn't run a strong enough campaign compared to the Tories?
I'm not so sure it's whether or not we had a strong campaign, whether the negative campaign was even stronger, and it certainly was a negative campaign nonetheless. We had papers and media, I have to say, telling people not to bother to vote, day after day. It's that kind of barrage which puts Europe on the back burner. And also I think the Kosovo crisis had a great effect in making sure that people didn't know there was a poll, however accidental that was.
All right, maybe those are Labour excuses. Let's turn to Chris Huhne from the Liberal Democrats. Was this a victory for PR, do you think? Because you're a newly elected MEP here, aren't you?
Well, our representation has gone up by 4 times across the country as a whole. So obviously from that point of view, we're extremely pleased. But I think this is a real wake-up call for the pro-European forces in British society. Because frankly, we were not able to take on fair and square the William Hague slogan, in Europe but not run by Europe, which actually translates as out of Europe and run by the Little Englanders. And that's, that's a real problem. I think the pro-Europeans have now got to deal with that fair and square, meet the argument, and you can't do that in a 3-week campaign when the news is being dominated every night by Kosovo.
I'm very sorry that we can't spend longer with you. I'm sure that you 3 will have a lot to discuss and a lot to take to the European Parliament. Congratulations again. From a gloriously sunny Winchester, I'll hand back to the studio in London.
It's a very hot studio as well, isn't it? So let's
hot
find out if we're hot inside, because it's hot outside.
It's all this sunshine, John. The best of it yesterday was down in the West Country. Penzance had 14 hours. It's pretty sunny down in Plymouth this morning. If we take a look down there, you can see, very nice picture it is too. It's not sunny everywhere though. If we come back into the studio, there's much more cloud up to the northwest. There's some rain moving across Scotland at the moment. But I think later on this afternoon and this evening we'll find some drier, brighter weather getting into northwestern parts of the British Isles. Still rather cloudy through this central section with the odd spot of drizzly rain on west-facing coasts and hills. That's the forecast. Back to Sophie and John.
Peter, thank you very much. Coming up on Breakfast News at 8 o'clock, the Conservative Party made widespread gains in the European elections, but only around 20% of the population bothered to vote.
And another tense night in Kosovo. As troops continue to pour into the country, NATO says that negotiations with the Russians are continuing to determine what role they'll play in the peacekeeping effort. But first, the news, travel and weather, wherever you are this morning.
Good morning. The news now from South Today. The Green and UK independence parties are still celebrating their victories in last night's European elections. In the South East, 11 MEPs were elected. In the South West, there are 7. The UK Independence Party, which advocates total withdrawal from Europe, now has 2 MEPs. In the South East, the top 5 on the Conservatives list were elected. Labour gained 2 seats, as did the Liberal Democrats. The Green Party gained 1 seat and Nigel Farage was voted in as MEP for the UK Independence Party. In the South West, the Conservatives dominated the evening. They gained 4 of the 7 seats up for election. Labour gained 1 seat, as did Graham Watson for the Liberal Democrats. Michael Holmes, the leader of the UK Independence Party, took a seat too. The Conservatives are celebrating taking half of the total number of seats available in the South. Tim Burke reports.
In the South West, the Conservatives took 4 of the 7 seats available. Labour and the Liberal Democrats were disappointed with just 1 each. But the UK Independence Party were rejoicing at their first real inroad to political power. And so too in the South East. Nigel Farage is the second of the UK IP's MEPs. In the South East, the Conservatives took 5 of the 11 seats, Labour and the Liberal Democrats 2 apiece. But here, the Greens were celebrating.
It was a tense moment, but I think it's a real vindication for those hundreds of people, the thousands of people that voted Green, so we're tremendously excited. And it shows we're on the national stage now, we're here to stay, so watch out for the next elections as well.
The Conservatives are happy that those of us who bothered to vote apparently endorse their message on Europe. Tim Burke for BBC South Today.
And we'll have a full roundup of election results in half an hour. On to other news now. A 17-year-old boy has died after being found with extensive injuries in Southsea. Martin Granger from North End in Portsmouth was found opposite South Parade Pier at the junction with Clarendon Road late last night. He was taken to hospital but later died. Hampshire Police have launched an investigation. Thousands of people in East Sussex could be at risk of water restrictions, according to the Environment Agency. It's delivered a strong warning to Eastbourne-based South East Water for not making adequate plans to deal with the future drought. South East Water says the agency has got its facts wrong. A look at the travel now. In Hampshire, on the A35 Winchester Road, temporary traffic lights are in operation at the junction with Anglesey Road. That's because of sewer repairs. Finally, a look at today's weather, and it's looking good. The early morning mist will clear to reveal a dry day across the region with some long, hazy spells of sunshine. Top temperature 21 degrees Celsius. That's it from us for the moment. Join us again in half an hour.
To help them to change into an attractive female is part of my enjoyment of life.
Great transformations.
You just cannot tell if a person is telling the truth.
Great expectations.
So say I'll be round at 7 and show up at 11, because that doesn't really cut it with me.
Paddington Green, Wednesday 10:20, BBC One.
Good morning and welcome to the BBC's Breakfast News with John Nicholson and Sophie Raworth.
Yes, good morning. There are 2 main stories this morning. The Tories are celebrating a convincing victory in the elections for the European Parliament.
With all the results from England and Wales declared, they have 34 seats to Labour's 26.
Across Europe, there's been a swing to the right, with the centre-left losing its grip and power.
And this is the scene in Kosovo this morning. Serb forces continue to withdraw, but tension remains high, and NATO forces are again being prevented from entering Pristina airport by Russian troops.
Also in the programme, how a chance slip by a donkey unearthed what could be the largest collection of mummies ever found.
But first, Peter Cockroft with this morning's weather.
Thanks, Sophie. Well, the sun index tells us that the strongest sunshine today will be in the south. A lot of cloud further north with some rain, but some brighter skies into Northern Ireland and Scotland later on in the day. That's the weather. Now back to John and Sophie.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now, the Conservative Party is this morning celebrating victory in the European elections. With results in from only England and Wales, the Conservatives have more MEPs than any other party. Labour have lost many seats and their vote has fallen dramatically since the general election.
The Lib Dem vote also fell, but many smaller parties picked up seats. So far, the Conservatives have 34 MEPs, Labour 26 and the Lib Dems 9. The UK Independence Party took their first 3 MEPs ever. Plaid Cymru won 2 seats, as did the Green Party. BBC forecast for the share of the vote once all results are in suggests that the Conservatives will be the largest party with 36% of the vote.
Labour would have 28%, the Lib Dems 13% and other parties a total of 20%. That means that the Tories will have picked up some support since the last election, but Labour has done badly, losing up to 16% of the vote. The Lib Dems have also lost out.
For the Tories, it was smiles all round. For them, it's been a good election.
And despite the derisory turnout of just 23%, the result will be a boost for William Hague's leadership and his hardline stance on the single currency.
This is the comeback Conservative Party. We have done remarkably well. We've done remarkably well here in Yorkshire and also across the country.
I, being the regional returning officer, do hereby declare...
Pushed easily into second place behind the Tories, this was a humbling experience for New Labour, who've not lost a national election since 1992. But it was in their heartlands like Wales that Labour fared worst. They got more votes than Plaid Cymru, but only just, leaving them with the same number of seats, 2 each. A time for humble pie.
Tonight, the Labour Party in Wales and elsewhere in Britain, as we've been learning from the results, has had a somewhat sobering experience.
And in Scotland, the indications are that Labour will have fared as badly at the hands of the Scottish nationalists, though the final results there aren't due until lunchtime today. Already in Labour circles, there are mutterings about a lacklustre campaign and, privately, criticism of their campaign coordinator, Margaret Beckett.
The Labour Party has fought a campaign. It didn't take off nationally. This is not an issue of whether Margaret Beckett was responsible or not. Of course not. The Labour Party must take responsibility for its campaign.
Some celebrations, but nothing wild for the Liberal Democrats. Their glass half full, half empty. More MEPs, but their share of the vote down. Even so, their outgoing leader seems satisfied.
From here, I think now that we continue to build the party over the next few years. Many congratulations to you all. It's a very good night indeed. All the best. Good night.
Some of the smaller parties did well, with the Greens getting their first 2 MEPs, the UK Independence Party their first 3. They've benefited from proportional representation. But for Labour, these results are likely only to have further weakened their already dwindling enthusiasm for PR for Westminster. Norman Smith, BBC News.
The residents of the Kosovo capital, Pristina, are waking up expecting another tension-filled day as the NATO negotiations with the Russians at the airport continues. KLA soldiers have already made camp in a suburban school in the city.
It's been a tense night in Pristina, but British NATO troops have been on patrol. Their mission is to prevent the unsteady peace from breaking out into a new wave of violence. The presence of the alliance soldiers has been enough to convince ethnic Albanians that after so many weeks it's safe to walk the streets. For the Serbs who live here, though, this is their nightmare, and they're afraid not just of NATO, but also of the Kosovo Liberation Army, which has moved back into the capital. The sight of KLA guards openly standing outside a school which seems to have become a temporary barracks is remarkable. 2 days ago, for these men to appear on the streets would have meant certain death. It looks like being another day of tension at Pristina airfield. The Russians who got there before the British parachute regiment still have control. They say they're part of the international presence here, KFOR, but so far they've proved unwilling to fall into line with NATO commanders who want the British paras here, the Russians elsewhere. The negotiations to find a settlement are still continuing. It's not proving easy. Outside Pristina, Kosovo is still proving a hazardous and unpredictable place. A German journalist who'd been shot and critically wounded received first aid in a British Army vehicle before being flown out to a field hospital. The 2 colleagues he was travelling with were killed. It's not clear who attacked their car on a lonely rural road or why they did it. All of this goes to underline the fact that Kosovo remains a very dangerous place, and it's not only hazardous for the NATO forces here. It's also very dangerous for hundreds of thousands of refugees who are now so anxious to get back to their homes. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, with the British forces in Kosovo.
I'm joined now by our correspondent George Eakin, who's with British troops just outside the capital, Pristina. Good morning, George. George, can I begin first of all with the story that we're just hearing, that a mass grave has been discovered just outside the capital and that British troops are entrusted with a rather gory task of investigating who these people are, as if we don't know, and who killed them.
Well, that's right. We have had reports that a mass grave has been found at the town of Kaçanik,
It's not that near Pristina, it's much nearer the border with Macedonia. It's a town on the main road which all these KFOR troops have been using to access central Kosovo. It's a town which was largely Albanian before the conflict erupted. It's a town which would have been ethnically cleansed. People would have left their homes in large numbers, and we know that right up until a few days ago when KFOR entered, it was a town that was still being fought over, with KLA rebels in the hills overlooking the town and the Serbs in the town. BBC had a correspondent there in the woods with the KLA. So obviously KFOR has made a discovery. We don't know the size of it. And we know that at the moment, right now, investigators, forensic teams are on their way to the scene to try to preserve it, because it's very important that the scene is preserved and evidence of war crimes, if war crimes they are, is preserved to be gathered.
Now, George, of course, these we expect will be Albanian bodies, Albanians who are ethnically cleansed. In their turn now, the Serb civilians have begun to flee from Kosovo. Are they right to be worried about what could happen to them now?
Well, one certainly can have understanding for why they feel the way they do. The KLA has officially said that it will not exact retribution, that it will not take advantage of the Serb withdrawal. But again, our correspondent who was with the KLA just before NATO entered Kosovo was reporting that units around him were quite keen to take advantage. And obviously there are many Kosovo Albanians who've lost members of their families and who have, if you like, grounds for revenge. So the Serbs in Pristina are now a very insecure lot. By Friday this week, armed militia, police and troops in Pristina must have withdrawn. That means that in their eyes they're going to be unprotected, but that's the job that KFOR has set itself. Having set itself the task of reversing the ethnic cleansing of Kosovo Albanians, it's now on the other side of that coin got to try and prevent a huge exodus of Serbs from Kosovo.
George Eakin, thank you.
Well, overnight, Serb troops have continued with the agreed pull-out of Kosovo. In Prizren, the country's second largest city, Serb troops left supervised by NATO peacekeepers. Under the peace deal brokered last week, the rest have until tomorrow to move out of southern Kosovo. Well, our correspondent Clive Murray is in Prizren, where he joins us now. Clive, there's plenty of activity going on around you. Is the situation still as tense there now?
It is still a little bit tense, Sophie. It has to be said that there are still many Serbian soldiers here, paramilitaries and police. They're beginning to make the big push out of this area, as they're supposed to under the Kosovo peace deal. As many of their colleagues did overnight, we saw waves and waves of lorries and trucks filled with Serbian soldiers heading north towards Belgrade. But it's not just the soldiers who are leaving. It has to be said there are many Serbian civilians who are packing up. And indeed, just to my right in the main square here, there are numerous cars, buses being filled up by local Serb civilians. They're packing all their belongings on board. They don't feel that they're going to be safe staying here under NATO. They're making the big push north as well.
But why is it that they fear staying there?
They fear reprisals, which is understandable from ethnic Albanians who may be returning just 18 kilometers from here, from the border over in Albania. They fear reprisals from them. They don't feel that they're trusted anymore by the ethnic Albanian population here. Many of the local people here may feel that the Serbs are spies, still watching and looking on them and reporting back to Belgrade. And frankly, they don't believe that NATO is going to protect them from any of these possible crises or problems that may develop. NATO has made it clear it's here to protect the Serbs as well as the ethnic Albanians, but a lot of the Serbs don't believe that, especially as they see Serb forces pulling out of this region.
How long before people are expecting the refugees in the camps to return?
Well, certainly the UNHCR is saying that no refugees should return until this area has been made completely safe. Abandoned houses have been cleared of booby traps and mines, that kind of thing. So as far as the aid agencies are concerned, they're saying that it'll probably be another month, possibly even 2 or 3 before we see huge waves of people crossing the border. But I know from reporting over on the other side in Albania that many people are preparing to cross the border now. Because of the presence of NATO troops, they feel safe, they feel secure, and I suspect that a few hundred will be beginning to cross the border, coming back to their homes to see what's been going on here in the coming days.
Clive Murray in Kosovo, thank you.
NATO says that Russia will not be given its own section of Kosovo to police. 200 Russian troops entered the province at the weekend, surprising the Western alliance, and have since refused to cooperate with peacekeeping forces. There are fears that Russia may now use the situation to try and force NATO to give it a larger role in Kosovo. But this morning on Breakfast News, NATO spokesman Jamie Shea said this would not be the case.
Well, we do not believe that the best way forward is to give the Russians, and just the Russians, a whole chunk of Kosovo, because the whole purpose of this force is to be a unified force with a unified command in which NATO soldiers would be in all of the sectors, and the same procedures, the same arrangements would apply throughout. That's extremely important.
New plans will be announced today to halve the number of teenage pregnancies in the UK over the next 10 years. A major publicity campaign, new sex education lessons in schools and hostels for some teenage mothers are among the measures being considered. The plans are based on a report from the government's Social Exclusion Unit and will be revealed by the Prime Minister this morning.
Sam Jones is 16. She became pregnant when she was still at school and had to leave before completing her education. Looking after her daughter Danielle means coping with a lot more than other girls her age have to.
It's difficult because you can't do what you want to do. You can't wake up in the morning and think, oh, I think I just lay in this morning. Wake up and think, right, gotta go and get Danielle, she's crying. What shall I give Danielle? What shall she wear today?
Sam's story is not unusual. The UK has the highest rate of teenage pregnancies in Western Europe. Today, the government will announce practical measures to tackle the problem. These are expected to include a major publicity campaign spelling out the harsh reality of life as a teenage mother. Boys will be targeted by the Child Support Agency to pay for any children they father, and teenage mothers will be put in hostels if they're not looked after at home.
Condoms which are considered to be safe to use in this country have got the British.
These pupils from a South London comprehensive are being taught about sex by the school nurse. The government wants to see more of this kind of approach, where the emphasis is on how to form relationships and resist pressure to have sex early.
You're not promoting promiscuity or underage sex. What you are promoting is responsibility and negotiating skills and being able to say no.
Simply telling young people not to have sex is regarded as counterproductive. Instead, they'll be encouraged to change their behaviour. But ministers are aware there's only so much the government can do to achieve this. Chris Hogg, BBC News.
Now, some news in the last half hour. The supermarket chain Asda has agreed a £6.7 billion takeover offer from the US retailing giant Walmart. The offer trumps a previous agreed bid for Asda from British retail group Kingfisher. Under the offer, Asda's management will continue to manage the business under Walmart's ownership. Asda's Britain's third largest supermarket chain.
Archaeologists in Egypt, aided by a donkey, have discovered a burial ground they believe could contain up to 10,000 mummies. It will be the largest such find ever recorded. The tombs were found at the Bahariya Oasis, more than 200 miles southwest of Cairo. They include the mummies of wealthy and powerful people who lived over 2,000 years ago.
The desert southwest of Cairo has been renamed the Valley of the Mummies. Unearthing them has been a painstaking process. So far, 105 have been found. Many are resting on open surfaces, their golden masks in immaculate condition. Others remain unexamined, wrapped in linen or locked inside terracotta coffins.
The discovery is very important because it gives us idea about daily life and also about the religious significance in the Roman period.
Some of the mummies have now been taken to Cairo for further examination while the excavation continues. If this does turn out to be the world's largest discovery of mummies, archaeologists will have a donkey to thank. They were led to the tombs when the animal accidentally slipped and fell into the burial ground. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
Well, we don't know what's happened to the donkey, do we?
No, we don't, indeed. It is now 16 minutes past 8, and coming up in the next hour, the Conservative Party leader, William Hague, is here to tell us why his party's success in the European elections matters despite less than 20% of the population bothering to vote.
And in Macedonia, the wait to return home to Kosovo continues for thousands of refugees. We go live to our correspondent.
back now to the European elections. In Wales, Plaid Cymru have won seats at the expense of the Labour Party. And although the results haven't been declared in Scotland, the SNP are expected to do well there. With me now is our Scotland political editor in Glasgow, Brian Taylor, and from Cardiff, our Welsh affairs editor, Vaughan Roderick. Brian Taylor, first of all. So, the SNP expected to do extremely well.
I think the likely outcome will be perhaps neck and neck between the SNP and Labour, perhaps 3 seats each, with the Tories probably taking up the other 2, although the Liberal Democrats still have hopes. A number of people in the Labour Party in Scotland are, of course, deeply concerned by this result. They expect it to slip back, but they don't like being as close to the SNP as that. And 1 or 2 very senior figures I've spoken to are saying that they think that the problem has been, A, the voting system, just not motivating people, but secondly, that perhaps Tony Blair taking a presidential approach, they're giving the impression that everything gathers and clusters around him, means that a rival form of democracy like the European Parliament simply doesn't grasp the attention of Labour voters.
And Vaughan Roderick in Wales, Plaid Cymru, they're doing